Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a peculiar pocket of 18th century Europe. A world where your beard wasn't just a style choice, it was your passport, your resume, and your credit score, all combed into one suspiciously well-groomed package. You step out of the chill, pulling open the wooden door of a creaky roadside inn, its iron hinges groaning like an old man stretching after a nap. The scent hits you first: waxed floors, roasted parsnips, and the unmistakable musk of wet wool and pipe smoke. A fire crackles in the hearth, and the tavern is warm with quiet conversations and the occasional clink of pewter mugs. You look around, and every single man in this room has facial hair. Not just any facial hair. Not lazy stubble or half-hearted fuzz. No, these beards are curated. Measured. Catalogued, even. The innkeeper squints at your face with the same expression you'd reserve for a horse with suspect knees. His eyes drop to your chin. A flicker of doubt passes across his brow. You don't need to ask, you can already tell, your beard is too short. Or worse, symmetrical. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step deeper into the inn, boots thudding on floorboards smoothed by generations of travelers, deals, and ale spills. The barkeep is wiping a mug that's probably never truly been clean. He leans over the bar and eyes you again. "Travelin' merchant?" He grunts. You nod. You don't correct him. Safer that way. He gestures to a small ledger on the bar. You glance down. It's a list, names, dates, and beside each, an elaborate sketch of a beard. A literal face ledger. Some drawings include notes like respectable sweep, modest curl at jaw, and chin too bare, keep an eye. You raise your eyebrows. Trust record, he says, like that explains anything. Apparently it does. In this inn, and increasingly in many places throughout Europe, the quality and style of a man's beard are being quietly used to gauge trustworthiness. It's not official. It's not law. But it's real. See, the 1700s were an odd time. Enlightenment ideas were percolating like weak coffee. Rationalism was on the rise, but so were curious systems of semi-superstition. People were hungry for new ways to predict behavior, to determine who was trustworthy in trade, love, and public service. And for some reason, historians still argue whether it was due to fashion trends, post-feudal sensibilities, or one particularly influential mustache model, beards became the signal. A full, thick, symmetrical beard suggested order, discipline, and moral uprightness. A scraggly, patchy effort? That said you were either lazy, a liar, or both. Too styled? You were vain and probably trying to distract from something shady. Clean-shaven? Either a monk, a doctor, or someone about to rob you blind. You hear someone laugh near the fire, a man with an impressively curled handlebar mustache and a beard that could be used as a makeshift curtain. He's being slapped on the back by others. "Of course we trust you, Willem," one man crows. "You haven't trimmed since the famine." You make a note of that. At a nearby table, two traders are deep in negotiation. One gestures grandly, his beard swinging like, it's not cruelty, you realize. It's policy. Or more precisely, culture. These informal systems of trust weren't exactly codified. But in scattered guilds, inns, and trading towns from Bavaria to Burgundy, beard judgments became quietly pervasive. Some towns developed loose guidelines. 3 inches under the chin meant moderate risk. Over 6, high reliability. Gray streaks were seen as signs of wisdom. Split ends were whispered about. And like any system born from whimsy and paranoia, it only gained momentum. Barbers started offering certified trims, promising not to disrupt your perceived trust level. Merchants would include beard sketches on letters of introduction. And in a few absurd cases, there were even beard witnesses, friends who would testify that someone's facial hair was authentic and unaltered. You wonder, who decided any of this? Was there a beard council? A follicle tribunal? Historians still argue whether the trend began with a single pamphlet or spread organically across suspicious inns like this one. One theory? It all started with a satirical play in Paris where a villain's deceit was tied to a fake beard, and someone in the audience didn't get the joke. You shift in your seat, the fire warming your boots now. The innkeeper returns and leans in. Your beard, he says, low and slow, doesn't match your coat. You blink. Pardon? Trim's too fresh. You've been on the road, but there's no dust in it. No weathering at the edges. Either you stopped in a city barber yesterday, or you're not who you say you are. You stare. He stares. Then, slowly, he cracks a grin. Just messin' with you. You exhale. Laugh, maybe? Hard to tell under the weight of musty air and history. But as you look around, at the whispered deals, the stroked chins, the prideful glances into pocket mirrors, you understand. This isn't a joke to them. Not really. It's a system. Flawed, fuzzy, but functional. And tonight your beard is your passport. So you order a tankard of something warm and bitter, adjust your collar, and stroke your jaw, just enough to be seen. Because trust, here, grows from the chin down. You wake the next morning in a room that smells faintly of beeswax, old wood, and overcooked porridge. The window is open just a crack, and a breeze nudges the edge of the curtain like it's checking if you're awake. Outside, the village stirs to life. Carts rumble over cobblestones, roosters sound like they've just learned to scream, and someone is arguing about firewood volume 2 streets away. Welcome to the 1700s, where subtlety and volume are mutually exclusive. You stretch, run a hand over your face, and pause. Your beard. Still there. Still adequate. Still your best shot at being treated like a reasonable person today. You head down to the square. It's market day. Stalls unfurl like flower petals, baskets of root vegetables, copper pans, crusty loaves, and fabrics dyed in colors that feel slightly suspicious. A fiddler plays off-key beneath a linden tree. His beard is forked in the middle, not by fashion, but by something tragic involving jam and bad luck. Everywhere you look, beards. Not just on the men either. There's a woman at a lace stall knitting a beard onto a woolen hat, and a child with a painted-on goatee who seems to be playing merchant. An older man with a cane holds court near the well, his beard braided with ribbons. He looks like he's part elder, part enthusiastic curtain rod. You notice something else, too. People aren't just wearing their beards, they're reading each other's. Glances linger just a second too long on another person's chin. There's a language here, subtle and woven with meaning, like Morse code. Scholars believe this resurgence came partly from the Enlightenment's obsession with physiognomy, the idea that moral character could be read from physical features. Combine that with a dash of social upheaval, rising merchant classes, and a desire to be seen as reliable, and voila, beards came back swinging. But the fashion wasn't uniform. In England, long chin curtains became popular among tradesmen, thick and workmanlike. In the German states, carefully curled mustaches paired with short beards were thought to reflect precision and intelligence. And in some regions of Italy, the classic pointed goatee made a flashy reappearance, often waxed to improbable sharpness, like a fencing foil made of hair. Not everyone embraced the trend. Some Enlightenment thinkers, especially the French philosophes, still preferred clean-shaven dignity. Voltaire once mocked a colleague's beard as a hedge for fleas to nap in. This did not go over well. The colleague later published a 22-page defense of facial hair as the natural veil of wisdom. Historians still argue whether this facial hair boom was fueled more by fashion, philosophy, or sheer peer pressure. After all, it's hard to be the only smooth-cheeked fellow at a dinner table full of whiskers when trust is being passed out like cinnamon rolls, warm and quickly judged. You wander toward a tailor's stall and overhear two men haggling over a waistcoat. But they're not arguing about buttons or thread count. No, they're arguing about the vendor's beard. This collar's too high, the customer says, tapping the fabric. A man can't see your chin. What are you hiding under there? The tailor bristles, lifting his chin proudly to reveal a beard trimmed to a sharp, geometrically perfect triangle. Clean as a compass line, he says. Humph, says the customer. Too sharp. means you're clever. Clever's too close to cunning. You decide to keep walking. Nearby, a barbershop sign creaks gently in the breeze. It reads, Otto's Tonic and Trims, shape your reputation. Inside, the atmosphere is part surgical theater, part social club. Men recline on narrow chairs while barbers work with the precision of cathedral stonemasons. One man has his beard shaped into a precise curve, using a polished brass arc ruler. Another requests the trustworthy trader look, a thicker style with even tapering and a touch of salt and pepper chalk rubbed into the cheeks. You quietly sit in the corner, pretending to read a newspaper. Every now and then, a new patron enters. The barber doesn't greet them by name. He greets them by beard. Ah, the Van Gent swoop. Very reliable. Good morning, sir. Or, more cautiously, A little asymmetrical today, Herr Koppel. Rough night? One man even brings his own printed sketch, an ideal beard he hopes to achieve within 2 months. The barber nods. Ambitious, but possible. We'll need to talk protein. You almost laugh, but then realize he's dead serious. It wasn't just about style. It was sociology. A beard was more than hair. It was a statement of intent. A demonstration of daily upkeep, commitment, patience. In an age without digital records, this was visual shorthand. You couldn't always verify someone's past, but you could read their chin. And like all supposedly objective systems, it had its flaws. Prejudice, for one. Men with naturally patchy beards were quietly excluded from some guilds. Barbers in certain towns were known to enhance trusted clients' beards with special powders, or subtle combing tricks to make them look fuller. And occasionally, there were accidents. A merchant once lost a major deal because a child tugged off part of his beard while playing, revealing a previously hidden scar. His trading partner took it as an omen and walked away. Back at the inn, you overhear a traveler whispering to the innkeeper. Met a man down in Frankfurt with no beard but a brilliant tongue. Swore he could be trusted. The innkeeper grunts. Did you? The traveler sighs. No. Turned out he was using horsehair glue-ons. Swindled 3 of us before he vanished. You shake your head slowly. You're beginning to understand. Trust, in the 1700s, didn't wear a name badge. It wore a beard. And if yours didn't speak for you, well, good luck being heard. You're starting to see things differently now. Every beard you pass seems to tell a little story. There's the stern banker with a square-cut beard that could double as a protractor. The wagon maker's gentle wave of gray curls that ripple under his chin like the hem of a velvet curtain. And the butcher? A riotous, wiry mess that looks like it survived 6 winters and a knife fight, though his customers swear he's the most honest man in town. You're strolling down a busy street in a mid-sized German trading city, somewhere between charming and slightly sooty. There's the scent of yeast in the air, mingling with coal smoke and something that might be pickled cabbage. You pass a baker balancing a tray of sugar-dusted rolls, and he gives you a polite nod then, as if on instinct, his eyes dip to your beard. A second of silence. He keeps walking. That moment, that tiny flicker of chin appraisal, is what today's about. Because here in the bustling patchwork of Enlightenment-Era Europe, something odd has happened. Beard watching has turned into beard judging. And beard judging has quietly slid into the realm of unofficial credential. Especially in the world of trade. Take merchants, for example. A man arrives in your town, claiming to offer excellent rates on imported fabrics. But there's no documentation, no credit bureau, no Yelp. You can't Google him. So what do? You trust your eyes. You read his posture, his voice, and most telling of all, the condition of his beard. Does it look maintained but not vain? Does it suggest long hours but tidy edges? Is it oiled or too oiled? In the 1700s, these questions weren't eccentric. They were practical. Your entire livelihood could depend on someone else's trustworthiness. And beards became the shorthand people reached for, mostly because, well, they were just there. A London merchant named Haverton, you recall from a poorly copied travel diary you once leafed through, claimed he could gauge the decency of a man by the denseness of his chin thatch. He even went so far as to categorize his clients: the sweepers, long, honest men; the brushed, average risk; and the dreaded whiskered weasels, men with asymmetrical, twitchy beards and no repeat business. Historians still argue whether these beard-based assessments were accurate, or just desperate pattern seeking. After all, correlation isn't causation, and you can't blame a man's fraud on his follicle density. And yet, you duck into a shady courtyard where a group of merchants huddle around a large crate marked with red wax. They're doing business, but before any papers are unrolled, one man, clearly the senior voice, clears his throat and says, "First, may we all inspect one another." Inspect. Not weapons. Not documents. But beards. Each man nods solemnly. They take a step back, angle their chins toward the light, and silently survey. One man even leans in slightly to squint at another's cheek to jawline taper. After a tense moment, the elder nods. Fair and honest shapes, all. Only then do they begin to talk trade. You learn from a local eavesdropper, he claims to be a courtyard narrator, and you don't question it, that this is fairly common in smaller business circles. There were no official beard measuring tools in play here. Not yet, but the ritual had weight. In fact, some guilds took things further. In Prague, you're told, the Rope Merchants Guild briefly flirted with a beard code. Members were required to keep a beard at least 3 fingers long from chin to curl. Any shorter, and they were docked 1 sale's worth of dues. Too long, and they had to undergo a tidiness review, which involved 3 fellow merchants, a ruler, and something described only as the comb of judgment. The guild dropped the policy a year later after too many disputes erupted over comb calibration. You continue wandering the streets, passing a few barber shops. In one window, a sign boasts beard sculpting for the reliable gentleman. Another offers discreet mustache corrections. One window features a wooden display rack holding various beard oils, each labeled with things like Forthright Fig, Integrity Spice, and Modest Lavender. You can't help but smirk. Inside, a barber explains to a customer that rounded beards inspire more confidence than sharply pointed ones. Says who? The man asks. The barber shrugs. Says the chin. A street pamphlet vendor offers you a broadside titled On the Art of the Sincere Beard. You accept. It's 8 paragraphs of moralistic fluff, ending with a helpful diagram of which beard shapes correspond to which vices. Apparently, forked beards equals duplicity. Overly bushy equals indulgence. Neatly parted equals balance and good bookkeeping. You wonder how many lives were quietly nudged one way or another because someone judged a face without asking a single question. And here's where it gets a little sad. Because underneath all the fluff and grooming advice lies something very human. People just wanted a way to know who they could trust. In a world with limited information, slow travel, and paper-thin reputations, beards were convenient. A face was a walking resume. And a beard? That was the footnote. Or the fine print. Or the alarm bell. You stop by a fountain where someone's carved a face into the stone, the usual solemn mouth, the serious eyes, and an absolutely massive beard, curling all the way to the base of the basin. You sit there for a while. Watch a few birds splash at the rim. A small boy runs past pretending his scarf is a beard. A vendor shouts something about trustworthy bread, you don't ask. And you think about how fragile trust must have been to rest on facial fuzz. But also how beautifully bizarre it is that people tried. They didn't give up. They didn't decide trust was impossible. They just looked for it wherever they could. Even on someone's chin. You get up. Brush your coat. Run a hand over your own jaw, wondering, not for the first time, if today's beard would have earned you a handshake or a shut door. Hard to say. But in this city at this time, with this strange silent system in place, it might just have made all the difference. You're sitting on a bench now, one of those hard wooden ones near the edge of the square that's seen centuries of elbows, crumbs, and quiet schemes. It creaks a little beneath you, and someone long ago carved a rather enthusiastic mustache into the armrest. A small squirrel uses it as a perch. It's a deeply committed squirrel. You respect that. From your spot, you have a clear view of the barbershop down the street. Not the one with the fancy oils or modish signage. This one's older. Less flash, more reverence. A brass bell dangles above the door, and the lettering on the window reads simply, Hans Potter. Hair, face, honor. You wander in, mostly out of curiosity. And perhaps the faint, creeping suspicion that your beard might be underperforming by local standards. The place smells of clove, damp towels, and whatever century-old floor polish refuses to die. Inside, 3 men sit in tall chairs, faces shrouded in warm cloths. A younger man with sharp cheekbones and sideburns like dagger hilts stands near the counter, stirring something in a tiny copper bowl. Hans himself appears behind a curtain like a stage magician, older, wide in the shoulders, with a beard that could have its own council seat. He doesn't speak right away. Just looks at your chin. Then he nods once, slowly. Moderate trust, he says. Possible exaggerator. But unlikely thief. You blink. He waves you into a chair. As he trims and brushes, you learn something. This isn't just a barbershop. It's a local trust hub. A sort of grooming and gossip clearinghouse. Hans knows who's visiting town. He knows whose beards are being styled differently this week. And he definitely knows who's adding thickness with suspicious pomades. You glance to a shelf lined with little leather-bound notebooks. Are those? He nods. Ledgers. Of clients? Of faces, he says. Turns out, barbers in some towns, especially those like Hans, who inherited the shop from his father and his father before, kept informal records. Not just of trims and styles, but of impressions. Beard thickness. Frequency of grooming. Apparent sincerity of brow. They even assigned what Hans calls a face trust index. Not a number, more of a gut score. Something between honest uncle and desperate poet, he explains, tapping a chart with increasingly dramatic eyebrow drawings. You suppress a laugh. This might sound absurd now, but in 18th century Europe, barbers were often as trusted as scribes or clerks. They heard secrets. They witnessed transformations. They were literally shaping how men showed up in public. If someone wanted to disappear, or reinvent themselves, or seem just a little more reliable before a major trade deal, they came to Hans. Or someone like him. And in exchange, the barber got knowledge. Not scandal, necessarily, but trends. Risks. The subtle tilt of trust in the neighborhood. He tells you about a merchant from 2 years ago, a charming man with a flawless Van Dyke. But the roots, Hans says, shaking his head, they grew in patchy. Every week more paint. More wax. By the end, he was lacquered like a carriage wheel. People felt it. No one could say why. But the deals slowed. And then one day, poof. Gone. Did he steal anything? You ask? Hans shrugs. No. But he borrowed everything. And returned nothing. There it is again. This whisper of faith. The idea that if someone's beard lies, maybe they do too. And this shop? It's like a slow-drip polygraph machine. One of the younger barbers is now gently dabbing at a man's cheek with lavender water. The client sighs deeply, like he's confessing to the bull. You're handed a warm cloth to press to your face while Hans finishes. As it cools, he mutters to no one in particular, the chin doesn't lie. The comb just translates. You leave the shop feeling oddly cleansed. Your beard is neater now, trimmed just enough to say responsible without pushing into self-important poet trying too hard. Outside, the street has shifted. A small gathering of townspeople has formed in front of a stall where a barber, much younger than Hans and definitely more theatrical, is giving what appears to be a public consultation. He holds a hand mirror in one hand, a pointer stick in the other. A man stands nervously before him while the crowd watches. This, the young barber declares, is a classic mid-tier moral beard. Uneven density, slight fraying at the underchin. But the line? The line suggests late-life honesty. Applause. The man beams. The barber, she chuckles. He's been doing this every Thursday. Says he's helping the village reconnect with facial truth. I think he just likes the attention. But people are here. they're listening. They're nodding thoughtfully as if they've just witnessed a weather forecast for human integrity. The crowd disperses, and you wonder a bit more. You start noticing how people interact after seeing someone's beard. Subtle shifts. A longer pause before agreeing to a sale. A lighter handshake with a lopsided chin man. A quicker deal with someone whose beard tapers evenly and glows just a little in the sun. In some ways, it's ridiculous. But in others, you think about all the random things you've used to make snap judgments. Shoes. Posture. Email punctuation. People are always looking for a shortcut to trust. Beards just happen to be visible and interpretable, and in a century of constant travel, changing alliances, and suspicious trade partners, that visibility mattered. You rest on a low stone wall as bells chime noon in the distance. A horse snorts. Somewhere, someone is singing about cabbage. And you think, again, about how every culture finds its strange markers. To 18th century Europe, beards weren't just hair. They were heuristics. They were the shortcut to "can I trust you?" And the barbers, the gossipers, the beard watchers, they were the keepers of that fuzzy faith. You lean back, chin lifted slightly toward the breeze, wondering what your beard is saying to strangers right now. Probably something like, "This one travels." Might be tired, but mostly harmless. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. You follow the road out of the marketplace and down a quieter lane, where moss has started reclaiming cobblestones and every fence looks like it was painted with good intentions and terrible follow-through. A cat naps on a windowsill, its tail twitching like it's dreaming of bearded mice. You pass two shops. One sells brass instruments with impossible curves, and the other, oddly, sells nothing but jars of mustard with faces drawn into the labels. The third building is more modest, a timber-framed apothecary leaning slightly to the left, as though bowing to everyone who walks by. But what catches your eye is what's happening just beyond it. Two men. Two shops. One alley between them. And a rivalry you can feel before either of them speaks. On the left, a compact man with a neatly trimmed beard, angular and tidy, wearing spectacles and a vest that's just this side of smug. His sign reads, "Gruber's Goods, honest prices since 1714. On the right, a much taller fellow with a wild, luxuriant beard, untamed and slightly windblown despite the still air. His storefront boasts, Reinhardt's Rarewares, trusted by travelers. He leans against his doorframe with the casual menace of a man who's never doubted his own facial hair. They spot you at the same time. Both wave. You make the mistake of acknowledging both. Gruber steps forward fast. "Ah, traveler. Looking for something reliable? Something with a guarantee? Something measured by hands and not hearsay?" He gestures at his inventory. Orderly shelves, each item labeled, prices written in crisp ink. He smiles, and his beard seems to sharpen around the edges. Then Reinhardt saunters over. "Or maybe," he says with a grin that stretches through beard, "you're in the market for something with soul. Something a little wild, but true?" His goods are arranged in deliberate disarray, exotic items, handwritten notes claiming provenance, a crate labeled "definitely not cursed." They both look at you. You look at their beards. You have questions. Turns out, the town's been divided over these two for years ago. Both men arrived around the same time, both claiming to offer goods for discerning buyers. At first, the town was delighted. Competition meant better deals, right? But slowly, their approaches, and their appearances, began to diverge. Gruber kept his beard short, angular, regularly trimmed by Hans down the street. Reinhardt let his grow free, only occasionally bound in a loose braid when visiting clergy came through. Their shops mirrored their grooming. Gruber was precise, methodical, boring in a reassuring way. Reinhardt was curious, chaotic, a little dangerous. And the townsfolk responded in kind. If you wanted order, clarity, a receipt that didn't smell faintly of cloves, you went to Gruber. If you wanted surprise, mystery, and perhaps something that might whisper to you under moonlight, you chose Reinhardt. The beard, in both cases, became shorthand. If you asked someone in town what they thought of Gruber's reliability, they wouldn't talk about his accounting. They'd just say, Look at that chin. Straight as a ruler. And if Reinhardt's name came up in a conversation about risk? They'd shrug. That beard's seen things. One day, a visiting official from the provincial court tried to buy from both men. Gruber refused to serve him unless he agreed to a beard inspection policy. Reinhardt offered him a pipe carved from a mystery wood and said, "Trust begins where trimming ends." The official left with nothing but a headache. Historians still argue whether the Gruber-Reinhardt feud was a microcosm of Enlightenment rationalism clashing with romantic instinct, or just two stubborn men who happened to both own mirrors. You walk with them now, letting them pitch their philosophies as if you're a neutral judge sent by the Council of Beards, a real thing, you're told, but mostly ceremonial. Gruber says precision is a virtue. If you want someone dependable, don't trust a man whose beard can't stay in one shape. Reinhardt counters, stability isn't honesty. Let the beard move, and the soul speaks. Ever seen a lie curl naturally? I haven't. Gruber snorts. Reinhardt smirks. You resist the urge to take sides based solely on beard softness. They lead you to the town square where, apparently, an impromptu debate is taking place later. Beard measuring contests have been part of their rivalry for years, sometimes serious, sometimes farcical. Today's event? The measure of trust. A timed competition where volunteers describe a man's beard and then vote whether they trust him with money, secrets, or livestock. You're handed a tiny wooden ballot by a cheerful local child. Vote with your gut, she says, but mostly with your eyes. Soon, townsfolk gather. Some carry signs, neat beards equals neat deeds or let the whiskers flow, bro. Someone plays a drum. Someone else juggles cabbages. It's unclear whether this is part of the event, or just Thursday. You watch the debate unfold. Gruber points out that his records are impeccable, that his clients come back year after year, and that no one with a beard shaped like his has ever defaulted on a loan in this town. Reinhardt retorts that trust isn't a ledger, it's a feeling. My beard, he says, lifting it slightly like a velvet curtain, has been caught in 2 wagon wheels, 1 questionable romance, and a diplomatic misunderstanding in Strasbourg. And yet, I'm still here. The crowd cheers. Then also cheers for Gruber, out of fairness. Eventually, the ballot box is passed. You scribble something vague and drop it in. Afterward, the 2 men shake hands. Their beards brush slightly. A moment of mutual friction. It's oddly touching. You head back down the lane as dusk falls. Street lamps flicker. A fog rolls in, curling around doorframes and boots. And you realize something lovely. It's not about who is right. It's about how a beard became a philosophy. For Gruber, control. For Reinhardt, freedom. For the town? A way to measure, not just trust, but the kind of trust they wanted. Reliable. Adventurous. Predictable. Passionate. Whatever face they hoped to see mirrored in someone else's chin. You stroke your own beard absent-mindedly, wondering what it's been telling people about you all day. Something thoughtful, you hope. Something honest. You've barely left the echo of the town square behind when a slip of parchment flutters into your path, caught by the wind, twirling like a forgotten thought. You catch it midair. Someone scribbled across it in tidy ink. Tonight at midnight. Chamber of the Sincere Beard. Ask no questions. Bring tea. There's an address scrawled beneath it, no more than a vague direction and an old symbol shaped like a curled mustache. Naturally you go. Because you've already accepted, somewhere deep in your sleep-deprived brain, that beard-based societies might as well exist. So, just before midnight, tea in hand, you arrive at a narrow building pressed between a bakery and a shop that appears to sell only wheels. No lights. Just a brass knocker shaped like a bearded chin. You give it 2 taps and half a knock. The door creaks open. A man in a deep blue robe nods once, says nothing, and beckons you inside. You're in. The interior smells of oiled wood and something spicy, cinnamon, maybe, or cloves soaked in history. Lanterns hang low, casting everything in golden shadows. The walls are lined with portraits of bearded men, some regal, others wildly eccentric. One appears to be wearing a beard on top of another beard. You don't ask. You're led into a circular room where a group of people, all sporting real, false, or aspirational facial hair, sit in a loose circle, sipping tea. No one says hello. They just nod solemnly, then return to their drinks and the occasional beard stroke. You take a seat on a cushion that smells faintly of pine and polite conspiracy. After a few moments of serene silence, the man in the blue robe clears his throat. Fellows, he begins, we gather tonight, as we have done for generations, under the sacred sprout of sincerity. He's entirely serious. You try not to laugh. He continues, introducing tonight's topic, beard intuition and the reliability of chin lines in commercial forecasting. Apparently this group, formerly known as the Sincere Beard Circle, is part philosophical club, part informal trading alliance, and part social experiment. Their core belief? That the shape, length, and movement of a beard reveals subconscious emotional patterns. You sip your tea. It tastes like pine needles and gentle paranoia. A younger member leans toward you and whispers, the longer your beard moves when you speak, the more honestly your words travel. You nod like this makes sense. Another member holds up a small wooden model of a face, then affixes several beards in different styles, testing which feels more trustworthy for negotiating grain prices. This is all very real to them. And slowly it starts to feel strangely plausible. You begin to imagine a world where courts consult beard psychics, or diplomats wear false facial hair to convey diplomatic moods. Honestly, if neckties can carry that kind of symbolic weight, why not a bit of fuzz? Someone else rises and proposes a new trust metric, the whisker waver. It tracks the velocity of beard movement during conversation to detect tension. Excessive twitching, he explains, may indicate inner turmoil. Historians still argue whether secret societies like the Sincere Beard were legitimate mutual aid groups, Enlightenment-era satire circles, or elaborate excuses for men to drink questionable tea. This particular chapter claims a founding date of 1703, when a philosopher merchant named Elias Verdant swore a beard oath during a port dispute in Ghent. The oath allegedly involved balancing a small spoon on one's lower lip while reciting a vow of economic honesty. You ask if the spoon part is still observed. They look offended. Only during major ceremonies, someone mutters. The meeting continues. One woman delivers a riveting argument about how powdered beards create an illusion of depth, and thus disrupt intuitive trust assessment. A man counters, claiming beard powder only affects perception if the grain size exceeds 3 specks per square inch. There is actual math. You begin to suspect that academia may have missed the whole parallel universe of beard-based theory development. Eventually, the discussion shifts to the sniff test. You try to pretend you weren't paying attention. But no. The sniff test, they explain, was once a widely accepted but poorly documented tradition, used in various villages during the early 1700s. It involved smelling a man's beard, yes, actually, to detect traces of sweat, deception, or imported spice oils. A fresh-smelling beard suggested cleanliness, moderation, and truth. Overly scented or strangely earthy? Questionable morals. Possibly heresy. It's unclear whether this was based on any science, or just deeply wishful thinking. Still, the circle has resurrected it. Tonight's closing ritual involves sniffing one another's beards. Gently. Respectfully. You pass. Instead, they invite you to examine the sacred beard box, a small cabinet containing examples of beard clippings from notably sincere men of history. There's a labeled curl from a mid-level diplomat who once negotiated peace between rival tailors. Another from a tax collector who famously forgave half a town's debts after trimming his beard into a piece of. You're not sure any of this is real. But as you stare at those glass vials, each holding a strand of someone's long-gone whiskers, a strange calm settles over you. These people believed in something. They found meaning in the mundane. They turned grooming into ritual. And yes, maybe it was all nonsense, but it was organized, affectionate nonsense. The kind that gives people anchors in uncertain times. You leave the chamber with a satchel of beard balm, a gift, a tiny pamphlet titled Facial Geometry and Moral Clarity, and a gently smoke scent clinging to your coat. Back outside, the streets are quiet. Lanterns sway. Somewhere, an owl blinks slowly. You walk slowly, your breath visible in the cool air. You pass reflections in shop windows and can't help but study your chin a little more carefully. Not with vanity. With curiosity. What does your beard say tonight? Is it calm? Crooked? Is it twitching with dreams or steady with peace? You don't know. But you suspect, if pressed, it would whisper something like, I have seen things. I have sniffed tea in strange basements. And I remain soft. And really, what more can anyone ask of a face? Morning rolls in with the kind of fog that feels personal. It swirls low around your ankles like it's trying to start a conversation. You pull your coat tighter, the scent of last night's smoky beard balm still lingering faintly, like a memory that hasn't quite decided whether to fade or stay. Your path takes you through the outskirts of the town, where muddy fields stretch towards sleepy forests, and cottages tilt under the weight of moss and thyme. You've been told to follow the main road until you see the sign, Hildebrand and Hildebrand, Legal Affairs and Beard Arbitration. Naturally, you're intrigued. Because if there's anything 18th century Europe can do better than invent niche grooming cults, it's turn them into semi-functional legal systems. Sure enough, a squat brick building emerges from the fog. The sign above the door is flanked by two tiny, carved busts, identical faces with dramatically different beards. One long and noble, the other trimmed and severe. You knock. You're waved inside. The room smells of stale parchment and pipe ash. A stern man with a pair of steel-rimmed glasses looks up from behind a desk covered in scrolls, ledgers, and a small pot of ink thick enough to pave roads. You're here for the goatee case, he says, not bothering with pleasantries. You blink. Yes. I think. He gestures to the bench across from him. It's our third beard-related suit this month. That's above average, even for us. And with that, you're drawn into one of the most unexpectedly entertaining legal dramas in recent beard history. The case? A man named Joris Weller has been accused of commercial fraud, selling barrels of lamp oil that turned out to be mostly goose fat and river sludge. The key evidence? His beard. Specifically, the fact that, in every known record of him, he had a full, round goatee. But at the time of the sale, witnesses report he'd trimmed it into a narrow, angular point. They say, the lawyer explains, flipping through papers, that this abrupt change should have raised alarms. That the sudden shift in beard shape was an intentional act of misdirection. You're not sure whether to laugh or gasp. Apparently, in some regions, a man's beard style became a kind of legal constant, an identifier as serious as a seal or signature. Not just its presence, but its shape, direction, even grooming method. Sudden alteration could suggest false identity, concealed motives, or, worse, moral instability. One document laid before you outlines a local precedent, the Steerlin mustache reversal of 1711, in which a merchant attempted to escape his debts by shaving his handlebar into a straight bristle. His case failed, and the court ruled that whiskered deceit shall not pass under new guise. The Weller case hinges on 3 points. Did he alter his beard with intent to deceive? Was the goatee a known symbol of his trade identity? Did customers base trust on his facial presentation? You sit in on the testimony. First up, an elderly client who claims Weller's goatee was like a warm bowl of lentil soup, familiar, honest, comforting. When asked whether the new sharp-edged style alarmed her, she nods solemnly. I thought he'd been replaced by his morally compromised twin. Next, the town's local beard appraiser. Yes, that's a thing. He swears under oath that Weller's former beard conveyed robust values, while the new version had undertones of trickery, possibly even debt evasion. You nearly choke on your water. Even the local clergy get involved. One priest testifies that beards reflect a man's spiritual alignment, and a sudden chin angle of more than 30 degrees invites chaos. Historians still argue whether these trials were legally binding or simply theatrical community rituals. Some towns took them seriously, others treated them like civic entertainment. The line between law and farce was often blurry, and surprisingly well-groomed. The final witness is Weller himself. He rises, looking modest, beard once again grown back to its original comforting roundness. He swears he had no ill intent, that his trim was for a cousin's wedding, not deception. That he'd had a fever and made a rash grooming choice. That the oil's strange contents were due to poor labeling, not fraud. His beard wobbles slightly as he speaks. No one interrupts. All eyes remain on his chin. Finally, the ruling. The court decides that while Weller's actions were questionable, there isn't enough evidence to prove he intended to manipulate trust through follicular means. However, they do issue a stern warning: let no man's whiskers shift so suddenly that his nature be doubted. Gradual change is the path of honesty. Weller nods. Everyone claps, politely of course. Afterward, in the street, people talk not about the verdict but about his beard. It looks less guilty today, one woman muses. Maybe he oiled it properly. You pass a small vendor on your walk back to the inn. He's selling tiny wooden plaques with miniature beards carved into them, each labeled with things like skeptical but fair, ambitious but loyal, or looks trustworthy until Tuesday. You buy one. Because deep down, you know this wasn't just a weird trial. It was a reminder that people, no matter the century, will always find patterns in appearances. They'll always assign meaning to what they can see, even when it's laughably fuzzy. And sometimes they're right. You return to your inn room and sit by the window, the moon casting soft silver on the street below. You touch your jaw thoughtful. If someone took you to court based on your beard, what would the verdict be? Honest? Muddled? Depends on the wind? You smirk quietly and let the thought drift out into the night. The world is strange. Its people stranger. But if a man's goatee can nearly ruin a town's lamp supply, then maybe, just maybe, every chin does carry a little weight after all. You wake to birds arguing in the rafters above your bed, passionate little creatures with no sense of volume control. The morning light pours in through a warped windowpane, catching the dust in soft suspension. You rub your eyes, pat your beard, and check its shape like someone verifying the structural integrity of a drawbridge. Still present. Still trustworthy, probably. Outside, the town is stretching into the day. Horses snort, children squeal, and someone has already managed to burn toast loudly. You make your way back toward the central square, where a man is setting up a curious booth. A painted sign hangs above him, the beard cartographer. Naturally, you approach. He's tall, with a wispy mustache and a goatee that curls at the ends like punctuation marks. On the table in front of him is a large, sepia-toned map, not of land, but of beard types. Lines crisscross the page like a celestial chart, each quadrant labeled with increasingly creative descriptors. You ask if he's serious. Oh, entirely, he replies, dipping a quill into ink. This is the cartogramma barbe. A visual representation of trust, temperament, and geographic grooming patterns. You blink. He points to the upper left quadrant. That's the province of Steady Oaks, home to symmetrical full beards with wide bases. Excellent for judicial types. Very reliable. Then to the lower right. Here, the Strait of Bristle Whimsy. Sparse goatees, uneven patches. Unpredictable, but surprisingly kind-hearted. He even taps a region he calls the Plateau of the Pretender. A zone reserved for beards that are technically real but suspiciously shaped. Too much effort can backfire, he warns. Trust is a delicate bloom, easily wilted by vanity. You examine the chart more closely. Little ink drawings of facial hairstyles are clustered across the map, each associated with personality traits, professions, and even known historical incidents. A modest chinstrap? Minor honesty with clerical ambition. The classic Van Dyke? Magnet for mid-level confidence. The elusive dual-plated Nordic fork? Loyal, people generally like you, he adds, but never quite know if they should give you their last plum. You're oddly flattered. Historians still argue whether charts like the cartogramma were used seriously or were satirical tools meant to poke fun at society's obsession with appearance. Several were found among merchant records and tucked into old court documents, suggesting at least some level of respect. Others appeared in comedy plays of the time. One particularly scathing work depicted a judge who sentenced people based solely on their beard quadrant. It ended badly for the asymmetrical types. But here, in this sun-dappled square, the map feels real. Or at least, real enough. People stop by, murmuring as the cartographer pinpoints their coordinates. A baker with thick mutton chops is placed in the reliable arc, and a sheepherder with a wispy neck beard is assigned to the uncertainty marshes. They both accept their fates with quiet grace. You notice something touching. It's not just men. Several women, either beardless or drawn on for fun, ask for readings, too. The cartographer obliges, offering playful placements based on eyebrow shapes, side curls, or invisible spiritual beard energy. One girl, no older than 10, proudly sports a fake mustache made of yarn. She's placed in the realm of feisty diplomats. Her mother nods like that checks out. It becomes clear this isn't just categorization, it's a kind of folklore. A social language. A shared, slightly absurd way of decoding the mysteries of character in a time before personality quizzes and BuzzFeed articles. As the day wears on, the cartographer rolls up his map and offers you a folded copy. Keep it, he says. But remember, it only works if you don't take it too seriously. You wander off with the parchment under your arm and a strange sense of comfort in your chest. Later, in a quiet tavern tucked behind the spice vendor's stall, you sip a weak ale and study the map. The drawings are charmingly detailed. Some beards look like waves, others like sleeping cats. A few resemble kitchen brooms trying their best. The classifications are ridiculous, and somehow exactly right. You hear a man at the next table chuckle. "Ah, the beard map," he says, pointing with a callous finger. "I've been in 3 different regions in 1 year. Big breakup, then a religious phase, and now this." He gestures to his current beard, patchy but determined. You nod knowingly. You're among your people. It occurs to you how much of history lies not in wars or inventions, but in the soft, strange ways people made sense of each other. Before photographs. Before ID cards. Before body language analysis. There were signs, rituals, odd beliefs. And sometimes there were maps of beards. You finish your drink and step outside into the twilight, where shadows stretch like yawns across the cobblestones. As you walk, the wind catches the edge of your beard and lifts it slightly. You wonder, in the world of the cartogramma barbe, what direction are you moving? Toward sincerity? Toward mystery? Probably both. And either way, it's nice to know that somewhere, tucked between jest and instinct, your chin has a story to tell. You fold the map carefully and tuck it into your coat, just in case anyone needs directions. You wake the next morning to the rhythmic clink of hoof against stone. Outside, a small caravan is rattling through town, 3 wagons, a pony with unfortunate bangs, and a man perched high on the lead seat calling out, "Trust for sale." Portable and partially believable. Trust, hand-stitched and oiled. You lean out the window, blinking in disbelief? Because of course, in a world where beards mean trust, someone eventually tries to bottle the whole thing and sell it by the spoonful. The caravan sets up near the old well in the square. You wander over with the rest of the town, curiosity dragging you like a leash made of twine and social obligation. The speaker introduces himself with great flair, Bernhard Dummel, purveyor of reputational enhancements. His beard, for what it's worth, is aggressively average, medium length, evenly shaped, and so unmemorable it circles back around to suspicious. His wagon opens like a puppet stage, revealing shelves lined with jars, bottles, powders, and brushes. Behind him, a velvet banner reads, "The Trust Formula, Beard Edition." You try not to laugh, but a small child next to you already is. Bernhard launches into his pitch. Tired of your beard saying maybe when you want it to scream reliable? Has your facial hair betrayed you in moments of commerce, romance, or casual lending? Then worry no more. He unveils a jar of beige paste. This, my good citizens, is Trust Tallow, a specially formulated blend of wax, oils, and rare root extract, guaranteed to add weight, symmetry, and the subtle glint of conviction. He dabs a bit onto a volunteer's beard and combs it in with theatrical flourishes. The poor man blinks as the crowd oos appreciatively. Someone whispers, "He does look more honest." Someone else mutters, "Or more like a cake." Bernhard beams. But wait, there's more. For those whose beards lack density, I offer the whisper thickener, dusted gently, and your chin will speak volumes. You watch as the concoctions are applied to more volunteers. One man goes from quiet neighbor to possibly a trusted notary in under 5 minutes. Another ends up looking like a magician who forgot which century he's in. It's ridiculous. It's genius. It's also strangely familiar. Because even back then, perhaps especially back then, appearances weren't just vanity. They were protection, advertisement, social armor. If you couldn't grow the beard you wanted, why not help it along? Historians still argue whether Dummel's concoctions were harmless cosmetics or part of a larger scam culture that preyed on the anxieties of the newly upwardly mobile. The 18th century saw a rise in what some scholars call authenticity performance, an era where people curated not just their outfits, but their entire presence, with beard powder joining the ranks of voice lessons and forged letters of recommendation. Some even suggest that beard-boosting industries preceded modern self-help culture by a full 100 years. A pamphlet you're handed, most likely printed in the back of Dummel's wagon, lists testimonials from satisfied clients. One claims he gained the trust of a fishmonger by simply brushing his cheeks with confidence clay. Another says the whisper thickener helped him convince a stranger to co-sign a donkey lease. Naturally, no one uses real names. Testimonials are signed with things like Honest T, Bartholomew, of good repute, and definitely not Bernhard's uncle. You talk to a few townspeople afterward. Some are skeptical, others charmed. One woman shrugs. If it helps someone feel trustworthy, maybe that's half the battle. That sticks with you. Because in a way, isn't trust just a two-person illusion? A hopeful collaboration between the beard and the beholder? You sit on a barrel nearby, watching Dummel pack up. He waves to the crowd. Remember, trust is like beard oil. It doesn't last if you don't reapply. There's applause. He leaves with 4 fewer jars than he arrived with. Not bad, really. You catch up with him briefly at the edge of town, curious about whether he actually believes his own pitch. He adjusts his forgettable beard and says some men trust their instincts. Others trust contracts. I trust that if you help someone look the part, sometimes they grow into it. Then he pauses, serious now. Of course, sometimes you help them fake it until they fake you out of house and home. But that's risk. Life's just one long bet on who to believe. You watch as he rides off into the fog, leaving behind a faint scent of beeswax and performative sincerity. That night you find yourself in the inn's tiny washroom, looking into a warped mirror. You stroke your beard slowly. You don't add any trust tallow, but you do comb it more deliberately than usual. Not because you expect it to change anything, but because you're starting to understand the language. The silent conversation that happens when two people meet, each wondering, can I trust this one? And your beard? It's the opening remark. You think back to Dummel's ridiculous slogan, if your chin won't speak for you, sculpt one that will. You hope your chin's been honest so far. You curl into bed as the wind rattles the shutters, thinking about all the little lies people tell with their faces. Not always out of malice, sometimes out of hope, out of fear, out of wanting to belong. Beards in this age aren't just hair. They're punctuation marks on the sentence of the self. Question marks for the unsure. Periods for the resolute. Commas for those still figuring it out. And sometimes, a curly ampersand for people like Bernhard, always adding something, never quite finished. You smile in the dark, wondering what your beard will say tomorrow. The next morning dawns damp and gray, with low clouds draped like shawls across the rooftops. You wander through misty streets, the sound of your boots softened by the drizzle. Your beard, soggy, unstyled, perhaps a little crestfallen, clings to your face like a soggy protest sign. It's market day again, which means every alley is a funnel of smells: frying onions, wet wool, overripe cheese, and wait, is that nutmeg? You follow it, ducking through a crooked side street and into a square you haven't seen before. At the far end stands a nondescript building with a small iron plaque by the door. Das Bartbuch von Leipzig. You squint. It translates, roughly, to the Beard Ledger of Leipzig. Well, you can't not go in. Inside, it's cooler than you expect, with a slight library mixed with cellar atmosphere. Shelves line the walls, each stacked with bound volumes wrapped in linen and string. A woman with tightly braided hair and round spectacles looks up from behind a writing desk. She eyes your beard briefly, habitually, not judgmentally, and nods in welcome. You clear your throat. Is this the, Beard Ledger? She smiles. One of several. But yes, this one's particularly well preserved. Local merchants began it in 1722 to track Qin-based reliability patterns. Of course they did. She pulls a volume from the shelf with reverence and opens it gently. The pages are yellowed but neatly inscribed. Each entry includes a name, profession, general beard description, and, most intriguingly, a score out of 10 under the column labeled Vertrauenswert, trust value. You scan a few entries. Jacob Rain, Cooper, medium beard with right curl bias, 7.2, reliable with barrels, suspicious with contracts. Friedrich Metz, grain seller, forked beard like a serpent's tongue, 3.1, eloquent, dangerously persuasive. Anselm Kraft, brewer, square beard with consistent grooming, 9.0, honest, deeply committed to hops. The scribe explains that the ledger began as an experiment by you raise an eyebrow. That seems highly subjective. Deeply, she agrees. But so is nearly everything humans do. You continue flipping through pages. Some entries even include tiny sketches of beard shapes. There are whole families of styles: droplet beards, corner snub bristles, wavelets of ambition, and the mysteriously labeled bitter ovals. One section is devoted entirely to anomalies, cases where a beard seemed trustworthy but wasn't, or vice versa. These were flagged with the initials VT, Vertrauenstäuschung, or trust deception. Historians still argue whether the Beard Ledger was proto-scientific data gathering or just a very elaborate barbershop notebook. Some scholars claim it influenced local credit systems. Others believe it was mostly gossip given structure and string. But as you read further, you find patterns. Traders with symmetrical, medium-thick beards consistently scored higher in both reliability and repeat business. Asymmetrical beards with sharp angles were marked as high charm, low return. Thin-line beards? Fast talkers. Enormous unkempt ones? Potential hoarders. It's absurd. And yet, you find yourself nodding. Not because you believe it entirely, but because you recognize the impulse. People want a guide. A system. A beard-shaped compass to point them through the murky fog of human intention. The scribe lets you hold one of the ledgers briefly. The pages feel dense with meaning, even if that meaning was half imagined. There's a weight to them, not just physical, but social. You picture a nervous merchant in 1734, sweating under his chin fuzz, wondering what score the ledger will give him. You ask the scribe if anyone ever tried to game the system. Oh, certainly, she says. There was even a guidebook published in 1739, How to Sculpt a Trustworthy Beard, full of diagrams, moral aphorisms, and trimming advice. She shows you a copy. One page reads, "The good merchant trims evenly and with care. A jagged beard is a jagged soul." Another warns, "Do not over-round the chin, lest you appear weak in principle. Do not sharpen the point, lest you frighten the elderly." It's beard geometry as life philosophy. As you close the book, she adds, they weren't foolish. They knew it wasn't perfect. But they thought maybe, just maybe, if we look hard enough, we'll see patterns. And if we see patterns, we can trust again. You thank her and step out into the gray day. The drizzle has softened into a persistent mist, and your coat collar is damp again. You walk slowly, turning it all over in your mind. A beard ledger. Scores for faces. Sketches of sincerity. You pass a group of boys throwing stones at a tree stump, laughing and shouting nonsense. One of them stops and yells, "You look like a 6.8. Before darting off. You're not even mad. Honestly, that feels generous today. You duck into a baker's shop and buy something warm and vaguely shaped like a beard. 2 puffs of dough joined at the chin with honey glaze. The baker calls them truss buns. He winks. Best eaten with confidence. Back at the inn, you study your reflection once more. There's a stray curl near your left jaw. You consider trimming it, then pause. What would the ledger say? Then again, maybe it's okay to look a little off-center sometimes. Maybe a beard doesn't always need to scream, "I am balanced and competent." Maybe it can whisper, "I've seen things, and I'm trying my best." You chew thoughtfully on your truss bun, nod once at the mirror, and feel, somehow, more honest. The next morning, the sun finally breaks through the fog. Warm gold slants. You wander toward the edge of the town, where a dirt road weaves through low hills and scraggly hedges. A man at the bakery mentioned an odd little village half a day's walk away, a place where beard color, not just style, determined whether someone was considered trustworthy. Naturally, you go. You pass a field of disgruntled sheep, 2 ruined carts, and a family of ducks walking with what can only be described as passive-aggressive confidence. Eventually, you reach a wooden sign barely clinging to its post. Welcome to Wolfenbruck, chin first, judgment second. Promising. As you enter, something's off. Everyone you pass stares just a little too long at your face. Not unkindly. Just with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for unripe melons or unfamiliar cheese. A little boy tugs at his mother's sleeve and whispers, "It's a dark brown, isn't it?" She hushes him with the speed of someone who's seen a beard color scandal before. You find the town square, a crooked circle of timber buildings with flower boxes, laundry lines, and a statue of a bearded man holding a scale. At his feet, a plaque reads, "Color tells character. Hue tells heart." You're just about to declare this ridiculous when a woman with a gray streak in her beard approaches. "New here?" she asks. "We like to know the shade of our neighbors. Helps things go smoothly." You introduce yourself. She tilts her head. Brown, with auburn undertones. Middle trust. Possibly contemplative. You'll do. She leads you to a tea shop, where the conversation quickly spirals into what can only be described as chromatic chin sociology. Apparently, Wolfenbruck has practiced this odd belief system for over a century. Not only do they believe beard styles communicate trustworthiness, they also believe beard color reveals core personality traits. Not metaphorically. Literally. The basic system goes like this. Black beards, passionate, often loyal, but potentially brooding. Intensity incarnate, someone whispers over their teacup. Blonde beards, honest, friendly, sometimes gullible. Regarded as the true neutral of facial tones. Red beards, brilliant but volatile. Historically feared, occasionally worshipped, always discussed behind closed doors. Brown beards, thoughtful, stable, maybe a little too careful. Like a librarian who owns a sword. Gray or silver beards, wise, deliberate, not to be rushed, but sometimes too fond of their own opinions. You suppress a smirk. It sounds like a Dungeons and Dragons alignment chart for facial hair. Historians still argue whether the color code theory originated in Wolfenbruck or was imported from obscure Baltic merchant guilds. Some say it began as a joke that slowly ossified into custom. Others claim it has roots in older folklore, where beard color was linked to elemental spirits or seasonal behavior. Either way, by the 18th century, Wolfenbruck had fully committed. The tea shop's proprietor, a kindly man with a pale blonde beard, offers you a pamphlet titled Hue and You, a guide to trustworthy growth. It's surprisingly detailed. There are flowcharts. You turn to a page titled When to Doubt a Copper Chin. It includes advice like, if they make eye contact while oiling, consider asking about their debt history. You ask the proprietor if people ever dyed their beards to gain advantage. He sighs. All the time. That's why we developed the flame test. Naturally, you ask. He explains that during trade negotiations, a sample of beard hair might be singed with a candle. Supposedly, real red hair smells slightly different when burnt. A falsified copper dye gives off a sharper odor, like singed nettles and desperation. You're not sure whether to laugh or leave. But the townsfolk take it seriously. They tell you about the Red Beard Panic of 1747, when a series of thefts were blamed on a man with a dyed crimson beard. 3 innocent Auburnchin men were wrongly accused before someone remembered to check the scent of the clippings. Historians still argue whether the real thief even had a beard, says a woman trimming dried lavender nearby. But that didn't stop the town from debating beard pigment legislation for years. Indeed, for a time, Wolfenbruck briefly considered issuing color certificates, small scrolls verifying the natural hue of a citizen's facial hair. The plan collapsed when someone pointed out how easy it was to forge ink-based documents in a town obsessed with pigments. As the day passes, you begin to notice subtler things. Brown-bearded folk greet one another with quiet nods. The black-bearded wave a bit longer, more intense. The gray-bearded seem to naturally form little huddles near benches and fountains, pausing every few minutes to reflect aloud. And red-bearded villagers? They keep to the edges. Not excluded, not reviled, just observed. Like a thunderstorm that might or might not ruin the harvest. You speak with a man named Otto, whose red beard is streaked with white. I was a baker, he says. People bought my bread, but always expected a surprise. If it had poppy seeds, they assumed seduction. If I added walnuts, they said it foretold chaos. He smiles sadly. I just like walnuts. He tells you the town is slowly changing. That younger folk care more about beard care than beard color. That someone recently opened a dye-neutral salon called Trust, but verify. You leave Wolfenbruck in the late afternoon, a bag of rosemary shortbread in one hand and the color pamphlet in the other. You walk slowly, thinking not about beard shades, but about the endless need humans have to classify, to sort, to understand the world by slicing it into manageable, if entirely invented, categories. In this town, your trustworthiness was judged by hue. Elsewhere, it might be the angle, the curl, the sheen, the silence between words. And somehow, it all comes back to the same quiet wish. Please let me know who to trust. Please let me be trusted. You pass the sign again on your way out. The paint is flaking. Chin first, judgment second. Maybe not the worst philosophy. You touch your own beard and wonder what color they thought it was. You smile. And walk on. You return to the town square under a sky thick with impending drizzle. Gray, moody, the kind of weather that makes fireplaces look flirtatious. The bakery's putting out the last tray of cinnamon twists. Someone's yelling about turnip prices with far too much conviction. And a small crowd has begun to gather near the edge of the square, around what appears to be a cart full of picket signs. A young man with an apologetic mustache hands you a pamphlet. No tax on Chin truth. The people of St. Leon say non. Intrigued, because how could you not be, you join the gathering throng. A woman climbs onto a barrel and raises both arms. Fellow beard-bearers, she calls. We will not pay the Chin levy. Not now, not ever, not while whiskers still grow freely and soup clings bravely to our mouths. The crowd erupts in applause. A man near you shouts, my stubble is sovereign. You discover that you've stumbled into the middle of a protest, one born not from revolution, religion, or royal decree, but from facial hair taxation. You lean toward a vendor chewing a clove-scented root and asked him to explain. Turns out, this is the aftermath of a regional tax policy passed 2 winters ago by a finance minister with, allegedly, no chin hair, and a deep vendetta against those who did. The policy was simple. Men who wore beards had to register and pay an annual fee based on beard length, with fines for unlicensed growth. The reasoning? Beards, according to the tax decree, conferred economic advantage, especially in small towns where trust and social credit were still beard-based. They claimed it was like taxing shop signs, says the vendor, snorting. As if our chins were real estate. You learn that the villagers of St. Leon, many of whom wore facial hair not as fashion but as professional collateral, refused. They organized. They resisted. They even drafted their own anti-tax beard code, which included such statements as to tax the chin is to doubt the soul and no beard left behind. They weren't alone. Reports spread of barbers refusing to cooperate, of underground beard measuring happening behind bakeries, of protest songs sung in low, follicle-rich harmony. One town even staged a beard-themed play where the villain, a smooth-faced tyrant, was defeated by a chorus of mutton-chopped revolutionaries. Historians still argue whether the chin levy was a genuine economic initiative or an elaborate power play to suppress communal networks. Some scholars believe it targeted not just beards but the kind of people who wore them: artisans, traders, scribes, folks whose livelihoods relied on mutual trust and visible consistency. Either way, it backfired. St. Leon became a symbol, a whiskered rallying point. The woman on the barrel, introduced to you as Mère Claudine, owner of the local apothecary, details how the resistance went beyond tax avoidance. Citizens began writing beard sonnets. Children wore faux beards to school in solidarity. Every Monday became no trim day. Even the town's geese were adorned with little chin tufts made of dyed wool. It was chaos. But a very polite, meticulously groomed kind of chaos. Eventually, the finance minister was forced to send a representative to negotiate. His name was Etienne Bruce. And, as fate would have it, he showed up with a clean-shaven face. It was not well received. He was denied tea at 4 different homes and refused a room at the inn. According to legend, a woman at the market refused to sell him apples unless he could grow at least a day's worth of stubble. Desperate to calm things down, Etienne did the only thing he could: he glued on a fake beard. The reaction was instantaneous and furious. He glued on fraud. Claudine roars from her barrel, and the crowd echoes the phrase like a hymn. Fraud on the face. Lies on the chin. The fake beard was seized and publicly burned in the square, on this very spot, you're told, with an entire chorus of villagers humming dirges while holding combs above their heads. After that, the tax was quietly repealed. But the memory lingered. Even now, Claudine says, some people mark the anniversary by applying beard balm at dawn. The innkeeper offers discounts for freedom beards, and local currency briefly featured a man with a fiercely unshaven face and the caption, "Let grow and let live." You glance around and realize that St. Leon has more facial hair per capita than anywhere you've yet seen. Elaborate curls, sweeping sideburns, mustaches waxed into poetic punctuation. Even teenagers sport scruffy tufts like political statements. You sit near a little fountain while a trio of musicians plays a quiet ballad titled "The Chin That Would Not Pay." It's weirdly moving. You ask one of them, a soft-spoken man with a braided goatee, if he thinks the protest really changed anything. He nods slowly. We learned something, he says. That when someone taxes what makes you human, even the smallest patch of fuzz can become a flag. You take that with you as the sky darkens. Walking back through the quieting square, past candlelit windows and beard-shaped lanterns strung between poles, you feel a new kind of admiration. Not just for the beards, but for the people behind them. The ones who stood up, not with swords or shouting, but with unwavering chin lines and protest poetry. Who understood that a beard wasn't just facial decor, it was trust, it was heritage, it was personal truth grown and shaped by hand. You stroke your own beard. It's grown a little more since you began this strange, sleepy journey. Maybe enough to count. Maybe enough to resist. Maybe enough to matter. It's just past dawn when you spot him, a man hunched over a crate at the side of the road, wearing a beard that doesn't move quite right. You wouldn't notice at first, except for the wind. Everyone's beard flutters slightly in the breeze, except his, which holds still with suspicious rigidity. As you approach, he startles, then quickly adjusts something near his jawline. Too late. You've seen it. A false beard. You nod to him with the solemn understanding of someone who has seen things. He tips his hat, perhaps an embarrassment, perhaps an invitation. Traveling salesman? You ask. He smirks. Traveling something. He opens the crate beside him to reveal an astonishing collection, false beards of every imaginable shape, size, and texture. Wigs for chins. Disguises for honesty. He even has one made from horsehair braided with silver thread, for nobles, he says, or people who lie about being nobles. This is Marceau, self-styled facial facilitator. In simpler terms, a beard fraudster. He explains that during the height of beard-based trust culture, there was money to be made by faking the right whiskers at the right time. A full, symmetrical beard meant reliable. A well-trimmed goatee might win you a spot on a trade delegation. A ginger streak could charm a creditor into extending your loan, provided you didn't catch fire in the sun. And if you couldn't grow it? Well, someone like Marceau had you covered. Literally. He opens a slim leather book titled The Art of Chinvention, full of diagrams showing how to apply, maintain, and remove false beards with minimal detection. There are pages on blending edges, mimicking beard oil gloss, and even practicing authentic beard mannerisms like thoughtful stroking, casual tugging, and the ever-popular ponder nod. You flip through, both amused and mildly alarmed. One chapter is titled Avoiding the Wigwag, How to Keep False Hair from Betraying You in Windy Conditions. Another discusses heat-based detection, which, according to Marceau, once caused a minor scandal when a man's glue melted mid-speech, leaving his trusted beard flapping like laundry on the breeze. Historians still argue whether facial fraud ever reached epidemic levels or if it was more folklore than fact. But numerous court records do reference incidents involving artificial whiskers, false puffs, and deceptive bristle bands. In some towns, barbers were deputized to perform tug tests before notarizing contracts. One case from 1756 involved a man who posed as a foreign diplomat using a beard made from dyed rabbit fur. He secured 3 trade deals, a borrowed carriage, and a marriage proposal before someone sneezed too close to him and revealed the illusion. Marceau chuckles as he recounts these stories. People trusted the beard more than the eyes. I just gave them what they wanted. But wasn't that unethical? He shrugs. More ethical than letting a man starve for lack of follicles. The world decided beards meant character. I just played by their rules. You ask if he was ever caught. He nods. Once in Marseille, a horse sneezed on me mid-negotiation. Beard flew right off. I told them I was performing a parable. Some believed me. Others just liked the drama. You can't help but admire his candor. He offers to demonstrate a few disguises. You watch as he transforms from affable cheese merchant to dour tax clerk to mysterious alchemist using nothing more than chin wigs and a slight change in voice. The shift is uncanny. Not just in how he looks, but how people might respond. Even you feel it. The stern gray square beard commands respect. The wiry pointed one? Suspicion. The long, oiled wave with a center braid? Honestly, you kind of want to tell it a secret. Perception, Marceau says, is the beard's truest function. Protection, projection, persuasion. He's got a beard for every archetype. The hero. The rascal. The reformed rogue. The humble mystic. One particularly sad little mustache is labeled, Taxpayers Anonymous. He tells you he once coached a nervous tailor through a marriage proposal using a confidence-enhancing beard rig. It worked. The couple's still together, though they now joke that he married her with someone else's chin. Is it lying? Marceau muses aloud. Or is it costuming for the soul? You don't have an answer. But you do know one thing: the beard isn't going anywhere. It's too useful, too expressive, too convenient for deception and truth. In a world where you might never see someone again, that initial glance, a strong chin curtain, a gentle wave, a streak of ginger defiance, meant something. Even now, as you sit beside a man with a suitcase full of lies, you feel almost at ease. Because he, at least, is honest about the dishonesty. Before you leave, Marceau offers you a beard. On the house, he says, everyone should have a backup face. You choose one labeled respectable but approachable. Just in case. He waves as you walk away, already stitching a new creation from what looks suspiciously like cat fur and embroidery floss. Later, at a small inn on the edge of town, you lay the fake beard on the table and stare at it. You don't plan to wear it. But still, what if? What if you needed to seem stronger one day? Or softer? Or like someone who could be trusted with the last biscuit? You tuck it gently into your satchel. Not as a tool for deception. Just as an option. A reminder that even in an age of powdered wigs, mustache wax, and identity bound to hair, people were still trying to find a way to belong. To be believed. To be seen and trusted, if only for a moment. And sometimes, all it took was the right beard. Evening settles like a sigh across the cobblestones. Warm candlelight flickers in windows, casting elongated silhouettes of plants, cats, and people tidying up thoughts after long days. You find yourself wandering without intention, feet tapping a lazy rhythm as your mind floats elsewhere, perhaps still trying to decode the ethics of chin disguises. But then you hear it: music. Soft. Melancholic. Slightly dramatic in that endearing 18th century way, like every note believes it might be its last. You follow it to a narrow courtyard where a trio of musicians plays beneath ivy-draped arches. One has a harp, one a violin, and the third, and possibly, plays a kind of flute shaped like a curled mustache. And next to them stands a woman in a velvet cloak, reading aloud from a small book titled The Love Letters of the Bearded Age. Naturally, you stay. Her voice is smooth, slightly husky, and entirely unimpressed with the ridiculousness of her subject matter, which only makes it more delightful. The first letter she reads is from 1732. My dearest Clotilde. Today I oiled my beard with the rosemary tincture you favor. The scent made the neighbor's dog bark for nearly an hour, which I took as a good omen. If my whiskers do not charm you, may they at least distract your parents long enough for me to propose without interruption. The audience chuckles softly. You settle onto a bench as the courtyard fills with that dreamy mix of sarcasm and sentimentality. Apparently, this is a weekly event, Beards and Ballads, hosted by a local historian and amateur performer named Adelise. She's spent years collecting letters, poems, and diary excerpts centered around the surprisingly robust link between romance and facial hair. And trust you, there are so many. One letter from a merchant to his betrothed includes the line, though the road be long and my debts longer, know that each hair upon my chin is a prayer for your safety. A noblewoman wrote to her lover, I dreamed your beard grew to the floor and swept my worries away with every step. Another entry is from a woman named Emily who refused a marriage proposal on the grounds that the man's beard had the energy of forgotten promises. The crowd roars at that one. You're handed a folded pamphlet detailing common romantic beard archetypes of the era. The philosopher's whiskers, long, graying, often cited in passionate poems about wisdom and lost time. The soldier's stubble, a rugged, inconsistent growth pattern that symbolized honesty, courage, and maybe a touch of forgetfulness. The poet's pointed chin, carefully maintained, used to stroke thoughtfully while writing overwrought declarations of love and seasonal despair. The widower's thatch, thick, sorrowful, prone to harboring crumbs of regret. Adelaide's pauses to offer commentary between each reading. The beard, she explains, wasn't just about trust in business, it crept into intimacy. Into letters exchanged by candlelight. Into flirtations whispered over embroidery hoops. Into the ridiculous idea that love could be measured in inches of jawline fluff. Historians still argue whether romantic beard symbolism was genuinely pervasive or exaggerated by nostalgic reinterpretations. But what's undeniable is the sheer volume of references in 18th century literature tying facial hair to emotional availability, commitment, and personal virtue. In one novella, a heroine falls in love with a man solely because his beard grows evenly despite constant heartache. In another, a couple quarrels for 7 pages over a trimming incident that led to irreconcilable bristled differences. You learn that beard-related gifts were common among lovers: embroidered beard cloths, custom-made combs, even tiny locks of beard hair tied with ribbon. There's one documented case of a woman commissioning a miniature portrait of her beloved's chin alone. Yes, just the chin. And no, it was not well received. But more than the novelty, what strikes you is the tenderness underneath it all. In a world where feelings were often hemmed in by etiquette and class, beards became a secret language. A little bit of unruliness that could signal affection, loyalty, even longing. Adelaide reads one final entry, dated 1741. When you left, you promised to return before your beard touched your collarbone. It now brushes your scarf. Come home to me, before your whiskers grow past the window of my hope. You swear the courtyard sighs as one. A violin plucks a wistful note. Someone near you wipes their eyes with a linen square embroidered with, yes, a tiny beard. Adelaide thanks everyone, bows dramatically, and invites you all to stay and write your own beard ballad if inspiration strikes. A few brave souls huddle near a table covered in quills, ink, and scrolls labeled to my whiskered beloved. You don't write one. But you do think about it. Because in some quiet way, tonight reminded you that trust isn't just a matter of contracts or trade deals. It's in the soft things too. The way someone shapes their beard for a date. The way they remember your favorite scent and rub it into their chin. The way their stubble scratches your cheek at just the right angle. Beards, it turns out, were never just about looking reliable. They were about being someone worth coming home to. You leave the courtyard with music still trailing behind you, dancing in puddles and archways. The moon's rising now, silver and aloof, and your shadow stretches long and bearded beside you. You wonder if someone, somewhere, once wrote a letter about a beard like yours. Maybe not a great one. Maybe just enough to say, "It curled when he smiled. And I trusted that smile." You pause, touch your jaw, and let the thought keep you company as you fade into the night. You wake to the muffled thud of boots. A lot of boots. Marching in neat, relentless rhythm down the cobbled lane outside your window. When you peek between the curtains, you see them, dozens of soldiers, uniforms sharp, faces unreadable, and every single one of them clean-shaven. Not just groomed. Shaved. Chins so smooth they almost reflect light. It's unsettling, honestly. Like a walking army of polished spoons. You dress quickly and follow the flow of boots to the edge of the training field where a temporary camp has been assembled. White canvas tents flap under a pale sky. Flags flutter on spears. And in the middle of it all, an officer is shouting something about chin discipline. You settle on a tree stump near the edge and listen. Apparently, these are recruits for the Regional Defense Militia, undergoing a 3-week discipline and uniformity training course. Part of that, naturally, includes mandatory shaving. Not just for hygiene, the officer barks, but to strip away vanity. Strip away identity. Strip away unregulated whiskers that might invite softness or sedition. Someone next to you, a farmer's son by the look of him, leans in and whispers, "They say it's because a mustache made a general look weak in the last war." Bad morale. Of course it did. You notice one or two of the younger soldiers absently touching their bare chins as if mourning what once grew there. Another gazes longingly at a traveling merchant's beard as he passes by, like a prisoner watching freedom stroll past in slow motion. But the weirdest part? The civilians. They're uneasy. In town, you start hearing hushed conversations, suspicious glances, shopkeepers offering slightly colder service to the shaved soldiers, as though the lack of facial hair makes them harder to trust. One man, cradling a basket of onions, mutters, "They've got nothing to hide behind." Makes them slippery. It's a strange reversal. Usually, we associate a clean face with honesty, open, clear, direct. But here, in this world where trust has become tactile, the beardless chin feels naked, unfinished, almost deceitful. Historians still argue whether this military grooming standard was born of necessity or image control. Some point to lice outbreaks during earlier campaigns. Others cite Napoleon's obsession with facial discipline. But many agree that in the late 18th century, mass shaving became a political statement, a symbol of submission to a higher order. It wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about conformity. There's even evidence of recruits being fined for attempting to grow a beard during their service term. One letter from a young soldier named Theo details how he snuck a beard back, one day at a time, by rubbing goose grease and hope into his cheeks. He was court-martialed. You learn that, in response, some villages developed subtle beard codes to distinguish allies from strangers. An angled sideburn meant, "I'm local." A subtle neck beard? "I support the Bakers' Union." The soldiers, for their part, begin to notice. A few try to lighten the mood by penciling in fake mustaches or drawing little chin flourishes with charcoal. One man even attaches 2 broom bristles under his nose and asks a tavern girl for a kiss. She declines? Politely. But still. You speak with one recruit, Henri, who confesses, "We shaved the day we arrived. Felt like I lost part of my face. Not the skin, just the story of it." You nod. You've heard that before. From poets. From merchants. From beard map cartographers and tavern balladeers. The beard isn't just an ornament, it's biography. It's the soft armor of self. Henri sighs. No one trusts me right now. Not until I earn new lines on my chin. One evening, the soldiers are granted a rest day. Many flock to the inn, sitting awkwardly among the town's whiskered citizens. There's polite chatter, strained laughter, and at least 3 beard compliments that sound more like personal crises. You watch one man, young, nervous, hold up a small mirror and examine his upper lip. After a long pause, he whispers, "Someday." You slip outside for air and find an older man whittling a stick on the steps. He gestures to the soldiers and says, "Poor lads. They came here to protect us, and we keep eyeing their chins like they've got secrets." You ask if it's fair. "Fair?" he repeats. "Probably not. But it's habit. We've trained ourselves to read beards like books. Now we're being handed blank pages and told to trust the binding." You sit in silence a while, letting that settle. Then, he adds, "You want to shake a man's hand? Fine. But you want to know him? Watch how his beard reacts to a lie." The soldiers leave after a few days. Their tents vanish. Their boots echo into memory. But something lingers. A lesson, maybe? That trust is fragile. That presentation matters. That in a time when so much was unknowable, people clung to what they could see, even if what they saw was just a curl of chin fluff defying the wind. You pass Henri on the road out of town. He waves. There's the faintest shadow of stubble on his jaw. The beginning of a story. You nod with respect. Because in a world of smooth faces, even a whisper of whiskers is an act of hope. A few days later, after a quiet breakfast of stewed pears and judgmental glances from a particularly nosy rooster, you find yourself drawn to a commotion near the town's old grain square. At first, it sounds like a market squabble, maybe someone trying to pass off damp flour as fresh again. But no, this is something else. A crowd has gathered, and at its center, 2 men are circling each other with the wary grace of cats forced into diplomacy. They each wear trousers tucked into boots, sleeves rolled to elbows, and most importantly, enormous beards, puffed up and braided like two angry squirrels facing off over nut jurisdiction. A woman near you leans in and says it's a beard duel. Haven't seen one of those since my uncle challenged a tinsmith in '38. You blink. A what? She grins. Oh, you're in for a treat. Apparently you've stumbled upon the duel of the tangled beards, an actual, semi-official method of conflict resolution in certain villages where beard-based trust was law, and disagreements between two bearded men required more nuanced resolution. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. The idea is simple. Two men, equally matched in social standing and follicular prestige, would engage in a ritual duel not with weapons, but with their beards. There are rules, naturally. Everything had rules in the 18th century. Especially when it involved each participant attempts to outmaneuver the other using tugs, twists, and strategic entanglement. No slapping. No punching. Just beard-on-beard combat until one yields, or until the tangling reaches such complexity that local children must be called in to help unwind the participants with wooden combs. You join the growing crowd just in time to see the officiant, a man in a velvet waistcoat holding a soup spoon as his scepter, step between the duelists. Gentlefolk, he announces, this dispute over wool pricing has reached its hairy peak. Let the beard settle the matter. Polite clapping follows. The two duelists, introduced as Lucien, proprietor of a respectable haberdashery, and Etienne, supplier of questionably dyed textiles, nod solemnly. Their beards are already impressive before the duel, but now each man spritzes his own with what can only be described as conflict cologne. The scent is vaguely citrusy, with undertones of lavender and emotional damage. They approach. Their beards touch, and then intertwine. It's slow at first. They lean in, move slightly left, then right, like dancers unsure of the choreography. But soon the action intensifies. Lucien flicks his head to twist an upper curl around Etienne's cheek bristle. Etienne counters with a subtle sway that loops a section of Lucien's goatee under his chin. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Someone behind you whispers, I haven't seen a double loop inversion like that since the Schnitzel dispute of '29. For 10 glorious minutes they battle. Historians still argue whether these duels were ever truly about resolving disagreements, or whether they were just elaborate performances, a kind of socially sanctioned peacocking for those unwilling to draw blood, but unwilling to back down. Some sources claim beard duels were common in villages where law enforcement was scarce and reputations mattered more than written contracts. Others suggest it was an excuse for adults to wrestle in a way that didn't scare the livestock. Whatever the truth, beard duels were not without danger. Tales abound of torn follicles, sprained necks, and one infamous duel in which both participants became so entangled they had to live together for 2 weeks until a traveling monk could separate them using a sacred comb and 3 days of very specific prayers. Today's match, thankfully, ends more peacefully. Lucien pulls a bold twist near Etienne's chinstrap zone and the latter, after a prolonged moment of beard-based suspension, yields. The crowd cheers. The officiant raises Lucien's arm, declaring him master of the main. Then comes the ceremonial untangling. 2 children in matching smocks step forward, each holding carved combs shaped like tiny rakes. With the delicacy of miniature librarians, they begin the slow, careful process of unwinding beards from beards, separating dignity from desperation. It takes a full 7 minutes and a small tin of almond oil. Once freed, Lucien and Etienne shake hands, both grinning sheepishly. The crowd applauds again. Dispute resolved. No scars. Just slightly sore jawlines and a newfound respect. You find yourself smiling too. Because this, strange as it is, makes sense in its own fuzzy way. In a world where facial hair stands for honor, trust, even social credit, what better way to resolve conflict than with the very fibers of your character? No blades. No bitterness. Just competitive grooming. Later that evening, the tavern is abuzz with reenactments. Locals try out fake beard duels with scarves, shawls, and one very patient dog. Someone brings out a jug of Tangle ale, brewed once a year to You sip your drink, your own beard now smelling faintly of almond oil from a friendly handshake. You ask the bartender if duels like today's still matter. He nods. They do. Not because of who wins, but because of how they fight. Anyone can shout. But it takes skill to tangle without tearing. You think about that as you wander upstairs for bed. Tangle without tearing. Conflict without cruelty. Struggle without scars. Maybe not a bad philosophy for life. You run a hand through your beard. It's grown a bit since your journey began. Not enough for dueling, perhaps, but enough for respect. Enough to carry stories. Enough to say, I've lived a little. And I didn't need to shout to prove it. The moon glows pale outside your window, the wind rustling softly like whispers through a field of chin hair. You smile. And sleep. The next day unfolds with that kind of slow, overcast stillness that makes your limbs feel heavier and tea taste deeper. A good day for quiet discoveries. You stroll through the quieter quarter of the town, the side with narrow lanes and houses that lean forward just enough to gossip across the alley. You stop at a storefront so unassuming it practically apologizes for existing. No sign. Just a gently swaying curtain and the faintest scent of sandalwood and waxed linen. Curiosity wins. Inside, it's warm and dim, with shelves that curve like old spines. Every surface is covered in delicate tools, papers, and devices that seem equal parts barbering and bookkeeping. A bell tinkles behind you, and a woman emerges from a beaded curtain, wearing spectacles on a chain and a long apron embroidered with beards of varying complexity. Ah, she says, eyeing your jaw thoughtfully. Late bloomer, are we? You resist the urge to check your reflection. She introduces herself as Widow Bridget. She runs what can only be described as a beard-measuring emporium, and you, lucky wanderer, have just stepped into one of the strangest microeconomies of the 18th century. Her business? Assigning objective metrics to facial hair, and then selling those metrics to parties who find them useful. You blink. So, you measure people's beards? Precisely, she says, gently taking a caliper-like tool from a velvet pouch. Length, width, density, symmetry, and tonal consistency. We even account for seasonal variation. Some men swell slightly in the spring. She gestures toward a large cabinet labeled Trust Index Archives. Within are scrolls, charts, and ledgers tracking the beard dimensions and associated reputational ratings of nearly everyone in a 50-mile radius. You ask who uses this information? Oh, merchants mostly, she says, adjusting her spectacles. A few poets. One very paranoid dowager who won't hire a man whose beard casts a shadow past his clavicle. She opens a drawer and pulls out a document titled Bridget's Beard Ledger. It reads more like a horological catalog than anything you'd expect to describe human faces. Albert Tren, 6.1 centimeters breadth, 2:1 chin taper, mild curl bias, recommended for spice import. Roland Gouv, uneven density, likely cosmetic fillers, monitor closely. Possibly a roofer in disguise. Pavel Leclerc, mirror symmetrical beard with auburn shine, exceptionally stable. Previously misdiagnosed as priest. You flip the pages, half horrified, half impressed. Every entry ends with a numerical score from 1 to 100. Widow Bridget calls it the Chindex, a tongue-in-cheek name that stuck. She explains that she stumbled into the business after her late husband, himself a barber, began jotting beard measurements in his accounting books. What began as idle notations became a booming niche industry. Now clients book appointments weeks in advance. Each session includes a measurement, character note, and wax recommendation. Some even opt for a chin print, a charcoal rubbing of their beard at peak volume, sealed with wax and framed. She shows you hers. It's majestic. Like a shadow cast by trust itself. Historians still argue whether services like Bridget's were essential tools in a society obsessed with visual cues, or just well-meaning pseudoscience. Some call it proto-anthropology. Others insist it was a beard cult in disguise. But there's no denying it was thorough. Bridget leads you to a curtained alcove where 3 men wait quietly, sipping tea and flipping through beard maintenance manuals. One wears a monocle and a truly awe-inspiring chin waterfall. That's Ernest, she whispers. Used to be a duelist. His beard has perfect lateral density. Nearly hypnotic. She offers to measure you. You hesitate, then nod. The process is surprisingly calming. She uses a curved ruler, fine-toothed combs, and something that looks suspiciously like a pastry wheel. She hums softly as she works, noting a promising cheek sweep and commendable vertical layering. When it's over, she hands you a small parchment. Chindex rating, 72. Style, contemplative curvature. Density, moderate. Growth rhythm, trustworthy but seasonal. Recommended sectors, archiving, herbal trade, low-risk storytelling. You blink at that last one. What does low-risk storytelling even mean? Stories with minimal conflict, she says. Mostly about mushrooms. Or rain. She pauses. You're a good candidate for dramatic pacing, though. The curve on your right jawline suggests patience. You're not sure if you should feel proud or mildly concerned. Before you leave, she shows you her most prized possession, a gilded frame containing the chin print of a famous traveling judge whose beard was said to inspire confessions merely by its presence. People used to call him the Whispering Jaw. You ask if Bridget ever faked measurements. Never, she says, looking genuinely wounded. A beard, even false, deserves to be measured honestly. Anything less is blasphemy. You buy a small bottle of beard oil labeled Truth Tincture and thank her. As you step back out into the street, the wind brushes past your newly measured face, and you feel, oddly reassured. Validated. Like someone finally looked at your chin and saw you. Because maybe that's the secret of it. In a world of masks and mysteries, someone took the time to measure your beard, not as a punchline or a power move, but as something real. Something worthy of quantification and understanding. And whether or not the numbers mean anything? Well, that's not really the point. The point is, you were seen. By a woman with calipers and a ledger and a heart still shaped a little like her husband's last whisker. And tonight, as you press that parchment into your journal and tuck the beard oil into your satchel, you think, you're more than a number. But you'll take 72. The sky over town darkens not with weather, but with powdered scandal. It begins at breakfast, when the baker's apprentice bursts into the square covered in what looks like pastry, flour, and shame. People gather. Gasps rise. Someone faints, not dramatically, just enough to require a bench and a fan. Because under the flour dusting his face, the apprentice wears not just a beard, but a wig-beard hybrid. You see it for yourself a few minutes later, a powdered wig, yes, but fused, intentionally and seamlessly, into the sideburns, jawline, and chin. A single, cohesive cascade of synthetic hair, styled into absurd symmetry, and gently misted with lavender starch. It is magnificent. Turns out, the apprentice bought it from a traveling stylist named Giselle Duventre, known for her avant-garde chin continuity work. Giselle believed that wigs should not stop at the ears. That beards should not be confined to mere chins. That hair should flow from crown to collarbone in one majestic cascade of artificial artistry. You don't know whether to laugh or curate an exhibition. You visit Giselle's pop-up salon, located in a repurposed carriage with gilded wheels and perfume-smelling curtains. The sign outside reads, Giselle's Graft, from wig to whisker, seamless since spring. Inside, it's a world of frills and formulas. Tiny pots of powdered gray, ash, sable, and gold. Miniature combs made of ivory bone, and, somehow, glass. One wall is filled with statement looks, full-head creations with names like Baroque Intimidation, Hearthside Confidence, and the Legal Fox. A woman steps out with a perfectly square jawline of curled horsehair that transitions up into an aristocratic bouffant. The entire structure shimmers. And it smells like apples. You ask Giselle, a woman dressed in green brocade and mystery, whether her clients trust her work. She smiles. They believe in it, she says. Whether or not they trust it depends on the lighting. She tells you that her hybrid style was born from necessity. Her clients needed to project power and stability, but couldn't grow full beards or afford custom wigs. So she created a look that combined both, part theater, part camouflage, part fever dream. At first it worked. In business meetings, people leaned in. In courtships, suitors swooned. But then, the starching started. Apparently, to maintain the wigbeard's dramatic angles, wearers began using a powdered glue compound mixed with lavender and chalk. The results were visually stunning, but structurally unstable. One particularly warm afternoon saw a merchant's entire beard wing collapse mid-negotiation, revealing the twine underneath. Trust, as you can imagine, did not survive. Historians still argue whether the backlash was due to aesthetics or deception. Some records suggest that powdered facial enhancements became associated with fraud and vanity, two sins even barbers refused to polish. Others believe it was simply a case of trend fatigue. Whatever the reason, the wig-beard hybrid fell from grace. But not before triggering what locals now call the moral powder panic. Barbers across the region began offering purity trims, basic, unpowdered beard cuts using only hand-heated razors and honesty oils. Clients lined up to cleanse their reputations, requesting shapes like the humble swirl or the contrition strap. One preacher declared synthetic chins a gateway to treason. Another claimed powdered blends confused the soul and clogged the conscience. You can't help but think it all got a bit out of hand. But that's the thing about appearance in a trust-based world. It's everything. If someone can fake a beard, what else can they fake? A ledger? A vow? The sincerity of their compliments about your soup? The apprentice, poor thing, issues a formal apology while a council of elders gently dusts the last of the powder from his ears. The townsfolk forgive him. Mostly. Though his new nickname, Whisker Wiggle, will probably linger longer than the scent of lavender. You return to Giselle one last time. She offers to try a light hybrid on you, just for fun. You decline, politely, citing weather sensitivity and an aversion to looking like an architectural sketch. She laughs. But remember this, she says, lifting a tiny brush like a wand. All hair is illusion. The difference between truth and decoration is how long it stays on when it rains. You leave with that quote scribbled in your notebook and a complimentary bottle of beard mist labeled doubtless. As you walk through the square, people are still discussing the scandal in hushed tones. Some declare it proof that fashion has gone too far. Others say it's the future. A few are already experimenting with sideburns that nod toward innovation without yelling treason. And you? You just smile. Because this, like every chapter in your journey, is about more than hair. It's about identity. Projection. The delicate dance between authenticity and performance. Whether curled or powdered, sown or sprouted, a beard is never just a beard. It's a mask with roots. A costume with consequences. A story you wear on your face, and hope the world believes. As night falls, you pass a couple whispering near the fountain. One asks, "Do you think his beard was real?" The other replies, "Does it matter if he meant it?" You keep walking, warmed by that thought. Because sometimes sincerity isn't about the fibers, it's about the feeling beneath them. And sometimes trust is built not with scissors, but with questions that linger in the dark like powdered ghosts. You wake to the gentle thrum of village life, milk being poured into tin pails, broom bristles sweeping yesterday's dust toward the hopeful edge of the stoop. It's a market day, bright and humming. But there's something different in the air today. Something woolly. At the main square, you find a modest crowd circling an elderly woman seated beneath a crooked sign reading, "Name your babe by beard." You blink. Surely that's not what it sounds like. It is. You ease closer, sandwiched between a sleepy midwife and a man holding a turnip like it contains secrets. The woman, introducing herself as Nana Verrett, offers a very old, very odd service, naming newborn children based on the follicular fortune of their father's beard. Apparently, in several remote villages during the 1700s, this was considered a legitimate method of prediction and honor. Families would consult local beard seers who claimed to read the future in beard shape, tint, and movement. Birth names were chosen accordingly, believed to set a child's course in life. Today, Verret offers a demonstration. A young couple approaches, baby swaddled tight like a loaf of hope. The father bows respectfully and leans forward to let Verret inspect his beard. She adjusts her spectacles and begins murmuring incantations that sound suspiciously like grocery lists. She strokes the beard's edge. Left curl indicates diplomacy. A double twirl at the chin, that's resilience. And this auburn patch near the corner, definitely musical talent. She pauses dramatically. Her name, she declares, shall be Eloisa. She will play the harp and argue about books. Everyone claps. Except the baby, who sneezes. You're intrigued, obviously, so you hang back to ask Verret more. She explains that in many rural parts of France, Switzerland, and isolated German principalities, beards were once believed to store ancestral traits, not just personality, but lineage. If a man's great-grandfather had a bold beard fork, it was thought to manifest generations later in leadership qualities or a fondness for pickled cabbage. Naming children through beard analysis became a sort of ritual, equal parts folklore, psychology, and small-town theater. Historians still argue whether these customs were earnest beliefs or more symbolic gestures, a way for communities to feel connected to heritage without actual documentation. After all, in places where few people could read, and even fewer could afford portraits, the beard was sometimes the only legacy you could point to. Verret reaches for a brittle book with a faded cover, Beards of Destiny, a chin-based compendium. Inside are drawings of beard types matched with name clusters and likely fates. You skim a few. The spiral drake typically yields names like Benoit or Celestine, associated with wanderlust and bread theft. The silent peak, beard arches high on the cheeks. Names Theodore, Agnes, linked to melancholy, strong backs, and forgotten talents. The laughing loop, distinctive curl under the chin. Names Luc, Odette. Life path, tavern storytelling or impromptu cartography. A page in the back warns ominously, avoid naming children from split forks with whirls. These beards signify chaos, surprise twins, and a tendency to lose shoes. You ask Verret how accurate her predictions are. She snorts softly. I once named a boy Henri because of his diplomatic neckline swirl. He grew up to argue with cows. That counts, doesn't it? She goes on to describe a village in the Alps where the entire year's naming decisions were postponed until the summer beard festival, when high-altitude air made beards fluffier and easier to read. You have questions. She does not have answers. She explains that beard reading isn't science. It's intuition. Pattern recognition. A folk art passed down through apron pockets and long afternoons when babies cried and people wanted comfort in the form of a good, solid name tied to something, anything, that felt like fate. You remember stories earlier in your journey, love letters that praised beard textures, merchants whose credit hinged on cheek hair symmetry. This naming business doesn't feel so far off. In a world built on visible cues, where trust and talent were often assumed based on your follicles, why wouldn't someone assign you a destiny based on chin shape? You sit on a bench and watch a dozen more babies named this way. One boy, whose father has generous sideburns with modest restraint, is named Jules. He will be a sculptor of objects no one asks for, Verret declares with pride. Another girl is named Mireille, based on a short but confident beard with a silver streak. She will speak 7 languages, none of them helpfully. Even parents seem to lean into it, part pageantry, part real hope. You see a nervous mother whisper to her husband, "Do you think the swirl's pronounced enough for Emmanuel? I really want an Emmanuel." And later, when a child is dubbed simply Claude, the man grins and says, "Good. He'll never get lost at roll call." Folksy as it is, it dawns on you that this practice wasn't about mystical accuracy. It was about grounding. Identity. Offering a child a name with a story, one that starts on their father's face and winds down into their own unfolding path. Even skeptics seem comforted by the idea. One grandfather, bald as a squash, laughs when his son's beard earns the name Sabine for his new granddaughter. Sabine! He crows. Strong name. I once loved a Sabine. She threatened me with a trout. Wonderful woman. You spend the afternoon watching these strange little ceremonies, each as sweet as it is silly. Before you go, Verette offers to read your beard. You sit bemused. She hums, touches your jaw, and says, gentle, with a hint of dramatic flourish. Slight asymmetry from doubt. Hints of peppering, suggesting travel and minor impulsiveness. You wait. She smiles. Were you naming a child, she says, I'd suggest Mathilde. Or perhaps Corentin. They'd be listeners. Slow to anger. Fond of rivers. You write the names down. Not because you need them. Just in case. You thank her, and she nods with that particular softness old people wear like wool. As you step away, you realize how many people gather not just for names, and maybe in a world without birth certificates, personality tests, or reliable horoscopes, trusting the beard was as good a starting point as any. By the time you reach the west end of town, where the thatched roofs slump like sleepy shoulders and the trees gossip in low breezes, you hear it before you see it. Snip. Buzz. Snip snip. A scuffle. And then someone shouting, "That's it! I'm starting my own salon, and no one here gets scissor privileges." Ah. You've wandered into the heart of the great beard debate, the one that's been quietly dividing barbershops across the region like a beard split at the chin. This is where the tension lives, just behind the swinging doors of two rival salons, the prudent razor and the verdant grower. They face each other across a narrow cobbled lane, the space between them dense with glances sharp enough to shave. Inside the prudent razor, it smells like eucalyptus oil, linen, and resolve. Everything gleams. Mirrors catch the light like judgment. The barbers here, clean coats, steady hands, believe beards should be shaped, trimmed, made manageable. Facial hair, says Luke, the lead barber, is like conversation. Too long and people stop listening. He gestures to his wall of styles, the merchant's neatness, the diplomat's crescent, the philosopher's practicality. Here, symmetry reigns. And oils are applied with tiny brushes shaped like oars. A sign above the chair reads, "Confidence begins at the jawline." Then you cross the street. The verdant grower is different. It's loud in the way a greenhouse is loud, full of layered scents, soft laughter, and the comforting hiss of kettles. It's warmer, with plants hanging from the rafters and cushions on every bench. The barbers here don't trim. They encourage. Your beard is a journey, says Clara, co-founder and former hedge sculptor. Why cut it short before it's done telling you who you are? Their wall has no style guides. Just photos of clients, smiling, windblown, resplendent in curls, wisps, forks, and twirls. No two alike. A sign near the window reads, "Let it grow, let it know." The feud between these two salons isn't new. It began 3 years ago, when Luke and Clara split after a disagreement about the philosophical implications of mustache angles. Legend says it involved a particularly rebellious goatee and a cancelled date. Neither will confirm the details. But since then, barbers across the region have quietly declared allegiance, either to the growers or the razors. Historians still argue whether this division truly impacted community trust levels or if it merely reflected changing aesthetic norms. Some believe the debate was emblematic of a deeper cultural shift, control versus expression, order versus nature. Whatever the cause, the effects were real. Clients began choosing sides. Contracts were cancelled if one party's barber leaned too far in the opposite direction. Beard styles were used to signal political leanings, even romantic compatibility. One family reportedly ended an engagement after discovering the groom's cousin had once received a shape-up at the prudent razor. You watch it unfold over the day like theater. A man nervously eyes both shops before scurrying into the verdant grower, tugging his modest beard as if begging it to become radical. Later, a woman storms out of the prudent razor shouting, "He cut my wistful taper into a corporate frown." In the middle of the street, two dogs nap beneath a sign someone scrawled hastily on a sandwich board, "Beard lines drawn. Choose your chin." But there's more to it than drama. You spend time with both camps and realize each has their reasons. Luke's clients speak of clarity, precision, and the power of edges. Clara's clients talk about wildness, identity, and the joy of surprise when their beard takes on a mind. Clara shrugs. Doubtful. Some folks just prefer boxes. Others like vines. You ask if she'd ever trim again. She smiles. I still have scissors. I just use them on hedges now. Easier to reason with. You cross back to Luke's shop. He's waxing a client's mustache into little upward waves. It's about boundaries, he explains. People respect what's maintained. You walk into a room with a shapeless beard, they think your finances are the same. Then he pauses. But I'll admit, Clara's clients smile more. He won't say it out loud, but you can tell he misses her. Not just the debates or the shared clients, but the way she trimmed flowers and beards with the same reverence. The way she refused to compromise on joy. That evening, something unexpected happens. A boy, about 10, maybe 11, walks into the street between the two salons with a large paper sign taped to his shirt. It says, in shaky handwriting, "I don't even have a beard yet." He stands there silently, holding a wooden spoon like a scepter. Then he shouts, "But I'm gonna! And I want options!" Both sides fall quiet. Even the dogs lift their heads. Someone giggles. Then another kid joins him, this one wearing a homemade beard of yarn and feathers. Soon there are 5 of them, all marching in a little circle, chanting, "Trim or grow, we're gonna show!" It's ridiculous. It's adorable. And it works. By dusk, Clara and Luke step outside. They don't speak at first. Just sip tea from identical mugs they both swore they lost years ago. Then Luke says, still using too much sandalwood. Clara replies, still trimming dreams into rectangles. They both laugh. No truce is declared. No alliance forged. But later that week, a new barbershop appears on the corner. It's smaller. Cozy. Named the Whispering Bristle. Its sign says, "All beards welcome." And for the first time in months, you see Luke and Clara inside, standing side by side, trimming and encouraging in equal measure. You smile. Because even in a world split by scissor politics and follicle philosophy, people still find their way back to each other. Sometimes through hair. Sometimes through stubbornness. And sometimes through children with wooden spoons and dreams. The wind changes the next morning, less a breeze, more a suggestion that something odd is in motion. You feel it as you pass the town square. A tension barely perceptible, like the moment just before a sneeze or a decision. And then you see it, a freshly hung parchment nailed to the council bulletin board. Announcement: the Office of Chin Verification is now open. Beard certificates mandatory for professional conduct. Signed, Bureau of Ethical Appearance, Provisional Charter Number 3. You stop. Read it again. Then again. Yep. You were hoping it was a prank. Or performance art. Or an unusually elaborate advertisement for beard oil. But no. It's very real. By noon, a line has formed outside the newly designated Bureau building, which used to be a spice shop and still smells faintly of cinnamon and suspicion. Inside, men wait clutching paperwork, documents, beard oil vials, and in one case, a velvet pillow upon which rests a single hair. You join the queue, because of course you do. A man behind you mutters, "Supposed to prove our beards are real now?" Next they'll ask for a soul certificate. In front of you, someone has braided their beard into a QR code that links to a testimonial from 3 merchants and a minor poet. You finally reach the front. A clerk, young, pale, determined not to laugh, slides a form across the desk. Please indicate beard or... The town council, eager to regain control of the Chin-based trust economy, has introduced the beard certificate, a formal document, embossed and notarized, attesting that the wearer's beard is authentic, self-grown, and unmodified by artificial means, including, disturbingly, plated deceit. The form takes 45 minutes to complete. Once submitted, you're taken to an examination chamber. Well, a repurposed kitchen with a magnifying lamp and a man named Didier who introduces himself as chief verifier. Didier has a monocle, a measuring rod, and a demeanor that suggests he once failed to catch a falsified mustache and has never forgiven himself. He measures your beard in 3 dimensions. He asks questions like, have you ever combed with malicious intent? And do you believe in strand honesty? Then he mumbles something about whorl patterns and scribbles on his clipboard with fury. After all that, he grants you a certificate. It reads, this document verifies. Name you. Beard status, certified authentic. Growth period, estimated 3.2 seasons. Texture, moderately trustworthy. Color integrity, natural with occasional fade. Style, storyteller's sweep. Certification date, this very afternoon. The document is sealed with a wax stamp shaped like a tiny beard comb. It smells faintly of pepper and legitimacy. You carry it out into the street, unsure whether to feel proud or deeply exhausted. Soon, everyone is talking about the certificates. Some think it's a return to order, finally a way to tell truth from trend. Others think it's nonsense. There's even an underground group now called the Uncertified, who claim real trust doesn't need a parchment. They hold secret meetings, swap beard oil recipes, and wear their non-papered whiskers with pride. Their motto? Trust the chin, not the ink. Historians still argue whether the beard certificate movement lasted more than 6 months. Some say it collapsed under its own absurdity. Others claim it became the model for later grooming guilds and honor salons in the early 19th century. Either way, chaos blooms. One man is caught trying to sell a forged certificate that declares him beard level, Oracle. He is fined 17 turnips and forced to read aloud from the official chin guidelines during market hours. A woman opens a business specializing in custom scroll cases for storing and displaying certificates. She calls them chinfolios. Business booms. A group of teenagers begins creating counterfeit certificates as art projects, proudly displaying ones that say things like Beard of Destiny, born during a thunderstorm, or this beard has witnessed 3 uprisings and 1 bake sale. Even Didier, the verifier, starts to lose faith. You catch him late one night, slumped in the spice-scented bureau, staring at a beard under a glass dome. It's too much, he mutters. All these lines. All these measurements. What if I miss a fake? What if the real ones just look fake? You pat him on the shoulder. No words needed. Because deep down, everyone knows, trust can't really be notarized. You can stamp paper all you want, but trust lives in tone, in eye contact, and the way someone refills your teacup before you ask. Still, the certificates persist for a while. Taverns begin requesting them at the door. No proof, no pint. Matchmakers begin asking for chindocs before arranging introductions. Barbers offer pre-cert trim specials for those seeking optimal measurement angles. Then, one day, quietly and without any announcement, the bureau closes. The parchment fades from the bulletin board. Didier disappears. Rumors say he's gone to live with the Uncertified and now braids fables into hair. But people keep their certificates. Folded in pockets, tucked in diaries, framed beside wedding portraits. Not because they need them, but because they remind them of a time when people tried. When they believed a bit of official ink could capture sincerity. When trust felt like something you could hold in your hands, even if it was only paper deep. You still have yours. You read it sometimes, on quiet nights. Not for the validation, but for the story it tells. A story about a town, a beard, a system, and a dream. A story that says this was me. This was mine. This was enough. You leave the town by a smaller road now, one lined with poplars and scattered feathers from unambitious geese. Your beard certificate, carefully rolled, sits in your satchel, its edges slightly curled, its wax seal flaking like a memory that refuses to fade gracefully. The paper still smells of pepper, and maybe of performance. The road leads you to the edge of a gathering. Not a town, Exactly, more of a grove, where people have set up wooden benches, lanterns strung between trees, and a low platform of uncertain purpose. You take a seat near the back and quickly realize you've stumbled upon a seasonal event of some local importance. The Festival of Forgotten Faces. It's quieter than a market, softer than a sermon, and warmer than most reunions. Here, once a year, the people of this quiet district gather to honor a peculiar tradition, remembering those who once had beards. And no longer do. It's not mourning exactly. No one's dead. Most just shaved. But in a world where facial hair meant trust, role, and narrative, the loss of a beard was more than cosmetic. It was character, peeled away. They speak of men who once led councils but chose a clean chin for love, or those who shed their whiskers in acts of protest or penance. One woman recites a poem for her uncle, who shaved to start again, leaving behind his old reputation like clippings on a barber's floor. A man steps forward. He wears a polished vest and an apologetic smile. His chin is smooth, his hands folded. I was once known as the Oak Beard, he begins. Now I am just Emile. He pauses. I miss it sometimes. Not the beard, but who I was allowed to be when I had it. The crowd listens. Not with pity. With a kind of gentle reverence. There's something strange and beautiful in this ritual. Like a play with no costumes, or a bedtime story without its final sentence. You sit quietly, watching how each person honors the change, not as a failure, but as a shift in season. One man places a small stone on a mossy altar. It bears a single etched hair, once part of his beard, now fossilized in sentiment. You learn that in older times, beard-shedding ceremonies were common. They signified new phases, leaving a guild, retiring from fatherhood duties, choosing simplicity. In fact, some historical sources suggest monks once held monthly unbeardings for initiates, cutting not just hair but ego. Historians still argue whether these rituals were spiritual, symbolic, or just a way to keep monastery drains from clogging. But clearly, for the people here, the beard was never just hair. It was a chapter. A costume of meaning. Something you grew into and, when ready, grew out of. You speak with one attendee, a baker with flowery cuffs and the faint scent of cardamom. Do you regret shaving? You ask. He smiles. Not really. My beard knew who I was then. My face knows who I am now. You sip warm cider from a clay cup and watch as a small ensemble plays soft music, strings and flutes and a curious drum made from a barrel lid and stubborn shoelaces. The melody is slow and searching. No one claps. They just breathe. Later, a woman begins lighting candles on a wide table. Each one represents a story once told under a beard. For some, it was a merchant's promise. For others, a whispered joke in a rainy doorway. For one man, it was the memory of his child reaching up to tug his chin for comfort. You place your own candle. You don't know why exactly. But maybe your beard has told enough stories for now. You watch the flames flicker. One by one, people step forward and extinguish theirs with a soft puff of breath, as if saying, thank you, or goodbye, or you can rest now. Then, finally, silence. Not empty silence. Full silence. The kind that settles around your shoulders like a wool shawl and tells your thoughts to sit down and behave. As the gathering disperses, you stand beside an older man leaning on a crooked cane. He gestures at the candles. Used to have a beard so wide birds got lost in it, he says. Now I just whistle when I need company. You chuckle. He pats your shoulder. Don't worry about how long it grows, son. Worry about how well it listens. You nod. Because yes. Yes, that makes sense. You leave the grove as stars peek through the trees and the last of the cider warmth clings to your fingers. Your steps feel lighter. Not because your beard is shorter or your pack emptier, but because you've realized something. In the end, a beard is not the trust itself. It's the invitation, the gesture, the storytelling door. And sometimes you get to close it softly, knowing full well that the stories stay. Now, as the last lanterns dim and the hush of midnight seeps into every creak of floorboard and rustle of branch, you ease your weight into the soft familiarity of your bed. Your breath slows. Your eyelids drift. The world of beards and barber feuds, chin certificates and powdered scandals, it all begins to blur, as if gently wrapped in cotton wool and set on a high shelf in some forgotten hall of memory. You feel the echoes of laughter, the soft snap of scissors, the quiet flicker of candlelight naming a child. They linger, not loudly, not with insistence, but with the same warmth as an old scarf you only wear when the sky turns thoughtful. Somewhere, a man still carries a comb he hasn't used in years. Somewhere else, a woman with sharp eyes and a measuring tape dreams of the perfect spiral loop. And far away, under a crooked sign and a crooked tree, someone whispers a name into the wind, just to see if the beard remembers it. Your own breath becomes slower, softer. You are not in a village now. You are floating between thoughts, between memory and imagination, where stories brush gently against the edges of dreams and keep going, on little feet of whimsy and wonder. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you meet someone with a curious curl near their chin, you'll smile. Because you'll know, it's not just hair. It's history. It's trust. It's one small story among thousands, humming quietly beneath the skin. So let it all go now. The roads, the ledgers, the laughter, the wax. Let your thoughts untangle. Let your night deepen. And sleep. Sleep.